Chapter 452. Hearing Zhou Lin mention Black City, Qin Chuan couldn't help but think of Chu Hua and his daughter Chu Ning, the governor of Black City in the state capital of Qing. Back then, he also obtained the spiritual talisman array and the spiritual talisman array from Chu Hua, these two extremely rare level 4 talisman array inscription method. It could be said that his current cultivation state was largely due to these two talisman arrays. Of course I know about Black City. Qin Chuan was a little confused. But what does Zerg's matter have to do with Black City? Zhou Lin glanced deeply at Qin Chuan and said, "Actually, Black Citadel isn't like what you think. It's just a place similar to an underground black market. Black Citadel is an organization that can go against the 4 great clans and 10 great sects." Qin Chuan was stunned for a moment, as if he thought of something, and asked Zhou Lin, "Senior, you're from Black City?" Zhou Lin nodded and said to Qin Chuan, "I am from Black City. My father is also from Black City. Yusin is also from Black City. However, we have never considered ourselves as people from Black City. This has always been a secret that we do not tell others." Qin Chuan looked at Zhou Lin with a puzzled expression and asked again, "But what does this have to do with Zerg? Speaking of which, if there's no Zerg, there might not be Black City." Zhou Lin sighed and said to Qin Chuan, "The leader of Black City was a powerful cultivator of the human race during the Great Chaos. After the insectoids were defeated by the combined forces of the human race and the demon race, due to some differences in opinion, this powerful cultivator angrily withdrew from the human race's Supreme Council and established Black City. The purpose of Black City is free trade and free development. As long as you have money, you can buy everything you want in Black City. As long as you have talent, you can get an important position in Black City. You can shine in the field that you are good at. What do you think of after hearing this?" Qin Chuan took a deep look at Zhou Lin and said, "Black Castle is going against the aristocratic families and sections. They are providing protection to the civilians who have nowhere to go." "That's right, Black City is fighting against the aristocratic families and sects, trying its best to provide a relatively equal environment for the civilians. Starry Sky Academy is funded and established by Black City. Starry Sky Academy will focus on recruiting and cultivating civilian geniuses, which is related to the purpose of Black City. Most of the students who graduated from Starry Sky Academy, as long as they are outstanding, will be accepted by Black City and become a member of Black City. The aristocratic families and sects actually allowed Black City, a force that has the power to overthrow them, to exist." Qin Chuan found it hard to believe. This did not seem like the style of an aristocratic family or sect. "That's the truth." Zhou Lin smiled. "Of course there is a prerequisite. That is, Black City has to have enough resources and strength to make the aristocratic families and sects not dare to act rashly." Hearing Zhou Lin's explanation, Qin Chuan thought about it carefully and felt that what Zhou Lin said made sense. He looked at Zhou Lin and asked, "When you were waiting for me in Black City, were you already a member of Black City?" Zhou Lin nodded. "I was already a member of Black City at that time, but I didn't have any status in Black City at that time." Qin Chuan looked at Zhou Lin curiously and asked, "Do you have a status in Black City now?" "It's not a status, I just received corresponding treatment to my performance. This time, I entered the unfettered secret territory to help Black City obtain the key to open the unfettered secret territory." "Key? You're also here for the key?" "Yes, when I learned that you were going to enter the unfettered secret territory on behalf of the Qin family and look for the key for the Qin family, I actually had something to say to you, but I didn't say it out loud." Hearing Zhou Lin's words, Qin Chuan couldn't help but think of Zhou Lin's hesitation when she said goodbye to him in Star Dragon City. It seemed that her hesitation at that time should have something to do with the key. "Qin Chuan, did you get the key?" "No." Qin Chuan shook his head frankly. To be honest, he didn't even know what the key looked like or where it was, let alone whether he got it or not. Hearing this, Zhou Lin sighed regretfully and said, I thought it was possible for you to get the key, but I didn't expect that you didn't get it. Zhou Lin trusted Qin Chuan's answer very much. She didn't think that Qin Chuan would lie to her about such a small matter. Moreover, she didn't intend to ask Qin Chuan for the key. Senior sister, is the key to the unfettered secret territory very important to you? Qin Chuan looked at Zhou Lin with a slightly complicated expression. If you really need that key, I will help you. Zhou Lin stopped, turned to look at Qin Chuan and asked, You gave me the key, so what are you going to do? How are you going to deal with the Qin family? I only promised to do my best for the Qin family, but I never said that I would definitely help them get the key back. Moreover, even if I get the key back for them, they won't necessarily let me go. Qin Chuan had already thought things through. Indeed, he wanted to settle the grudges between him and the Qin clan. However, the Qin clan had never thought of this. As long as he was still alive, he would always be a thorn in the flesh of the Qin clan. They had to get rid of him as soon as possible. As for the Qin clan's bloodline flowing in his veins, that was nothing more than a joke. In front of such a huge benefit, what did the thin bloodline between him and the Qin clan count for? It's Black City that needs the key, not me. Zhou Lin shook her head and refused Qin Chuan's kindness. Whether I get the key or not, it won't have any impact on my future. And I don't want you to bear anything for me. Hearing Zhou Lin's words, Qin Chuan didn't mention this matter again. Instead, he asked about the Zergs. Senior sister, do you people in Black City have to learn about Zerg? Zhou Lin nodded and said, the original intention of Black City was to fight against Zerg. Although Zerg hasn't appeared again for thousands of years, Black City has always believed that Zerg will come again. Now it seems that Black City's worries are correct. Zerg has appeared again. According to what you said, Zerg is very likely to want to use the Carefree Secret Realm as the foundation and gradually encroach on our world. It's just that they didn't expect to meet you in the Carefree Secret Realm, and the plan was thus destroyed. However, I believe that Zerg will never give up so easily. Qin Chuan nodded in agreement. He also felt that Zerg would not easily give up invading their world and would definitely make a comeback. By the way, what is the name of our world? Qin Chuan looked at Zhou Lin very seriously. In his knowledge, this world had the Star Dragon Federation and the Demon Realm, but there had never been a unified name. Zhou Lin looked up at the sky, her eyes slightly complicated. Translated through Zerg's language, our world should be called the Land of Exile. Chapter 453. When Qin Chuan arrived at the square in front of Xiao Yao Palace, he was warmly welcomed by almost everyone. Qin Chuan couldn't help but feel like he was holding a solo concert and receiving flowers from his fans. Among the people who welcomed Qin Chuan, some were people who had been rescued by Qin Chuan from Xiaozhong Mountain. Some were people who had heard of Qin Chuan's heroic deeds. There were also people who admired Qin Chuan because of his performance in the 6 Great Academies ranking competition. In short, except for a few people who didn't have good intentions towards Qin Chuan, most of them were very warm towards Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan, thank you for saving me. At that time, I really thought I was going to die. I have been waiting to thank you for a long time. Finally, I can thank you face to face. Qin Chuan, I don't care about your family background or identity. From now on, you are the boss that I recognize. Qin Chuan, I looked down on you in the past. That was my fault. If anyone looks down on you in the future, I will beat them to death. Hearing the shouts of the people around him, Qin Chuan smiled and greeted them. After dealing with them with great difficulty, he let out a sigh of relief and said to Zhou Lin, who was beside him, I really didn't expect them to be so warm towards me. Hearing this, Zhou Lin looked at Qin Chuan and asked, How do you feel? Qin Chuan thought seriously and replied, It's very strange. This feeling of being recognized and trusted is very good. Qin Chuan, I don't know how you will see me when I say these words to you. I don't think that they trust you or care about you. Instead, they hope that you will stand up again and solve their current problems for them through flattery. This is my point of view. It's very realistic." Hearing Zhou Lin's words, Qin Chuan couldn't help but be stunned. He didn't expect Zhou Lin to think this way. "You don't agree with what I said?" Zhou Lin looked at Qin Chuan. "Maybe it's because I've been exposed to too many things, so my thoughts are inevitably a little dark." "No." Qin Chuan shook his head. "I know you. I know you're thinking about me. Alright, let's not talk about these people. Let's go." Zhou Lin walked forward. "It's too noisy here. Let's go somewhere quieter." Qin Chuan followed behind Zhou Lin. The two of them walked into Xiao Yao Palace. Here, they saw many members of the demon clan. Towards Qin Chuan's appearance, the expressions on these members of the demon clan changed slightly. There was no hostility and no greeting. They appeared relatively calm. The two of them continued forward. When they were about to reach the carefree residence, Zhou Lin stopped and said to Qin Chuan, "There are many people at the carefree residence. They are all thinking of ways to enter the carefree residence. It's better if you don't go there." Qin Chuan nodded. If he went near the carefree residence now and caused the restrictions to flicker, then there would be a big problem. However, when it came to the carefree residence, Qin Chuan had some thoughts. He was very curious about the 3 brocade boxes on the stone table. If he didn't get anything from this trip to the carefree secret territory and only fought everywhere, then it would be too much of a loss. Seeing Qin Chuan's gaze pass through the crowd and look at the stone table inside the carefree residence, Zhou Lin smiled and asked, "You're very interested in the 3 brocade boxes?" "Of course." Qin Chuan nodded. "Since I entered the carefree secret territory until now, I haven't gotten any benefit. Now that the insects are flying everywhere outside, I can only think about these 3 brocade boxes. Speaking of which, is there any legend about these 3 brocade boxes?" "No." Zhou Lin shook her head and said, "As far as I know, these 3 brocade boxes have been here since the carefree secret territory was discovered. For thousands of years, no one has been able to enter the carefree residence, so how could they know what's inside the brocade boxes? And you are the most likely person I have seen to enter the carefree residence. If there was no insect plague outside, maybe you could give it a try, but now there is a sea of people here, so you can't do anything." Hearing this, Qin Chuan also felt that it was a pity. If there weren't so many people here, he could try to enter the carefree residence. If he tried to do such a thing now, he would definitely become the target of public criticism. "Tell me, who is that woman?" Zhou Lin looked at Qin Chuan curiously. "I can see that she cares about you very much." Qin Chuan smiled bitterly and asked, "Senior sister, are you talking about Yao Rao?" "Yao Rao?" Zhou Lin looked pensive. "Is she from the monster race?" Qin Chuan nodded. "She is the princess of the monster race, Princess Rao." Zhou Lin was slightly surprised. "She is actually a princess, but I didn't sense the slightest bit of monster chi from her body. When I first saw her, I also felt strange. She didn't have the slightest bit of monster chi on her body, so she didn't look like a monster race. However, she is indeed Princess Rao of the monster race. Otherwise, those holy sons and holy daughters of the monster race wouldn't be so obedient to her." Regarding Yao Rao, Qin Chuan didn't hate her, but he also didn't like her. Overall, the feeling was quite strange. "You have a story with her?" Zhou Lin didn't look at Qin Chuan. Her eyes were looking into the distance, seemingly unfocused. Qin Chuan smiled. "There is a story, but senior sister, isn't it a bit inappropriate for us to talk about these romantic things now? There are still insects flying all over the sky outside. Wind, flower, snow, moon." Zhou Lin slowly turned her head to look at Qin Chuan. "I didn't think that the story between the two of you would be romantic." Qin Chuan grinned and smiled awkwardly. "Senior sister, when we get out, don't go anywhere. Go straight back to the Black Moon Combat Academy. Zhou Lin suddenly changed the topic. What you need to do now is wait patiently. Wait for what? Qin Chuan was curious. Senior sister, do you know something? Since you know about Zerg, then you should know about the heir of the monster race. Based on your performance in the 6 Great Academies ranking competition, as well as your trip to the Carefree Secret Realm, you have the qualifications to become a preparatory Holy Son. As long as you don't give the Qin family a chance to cause trouble after leaving the Carefree Secret Realm, no one will be able to stop you from becoming a preparatory Holy Son. Although your teacher, Ningya, is only at the Golden Core Complete Realm, she still has some face. If worse comes to worst, she can still intimidate others and use her teacher, the Dean of the Black Moon Combat Academy, as a pretext. Senior sister, you've already arranged everything for me? This isn't my arrangement, it's my suggestion. In my opinion, this is the most important thing for you to do in the following period of time, and it's also the best choice for you. Senior sister, I'm actually not as weak as you think. Do I have to wait until I hit a wall before I choose to turn back? Qin Chuan was silent, and Zhou Lin was silent as well. The two of them just stared ahead, thinking about their own matters. Chapter 454. Under the cover of the insect cloud, 2 pitch-black figures stood on top of a mountain, exuding an evil aura. We have a clue. Band walked slowly to Sienna's side. He glanced at Sienna, who was looking into the distance, and said to her, "According to the little guy's feedback, I found traces of those people. They went to the place called Freedom Palace and hid in the restriction. When Band had first discovered Xiao Yao Palace, he had commanded the insect cloud to enter Xiao Yao Palace. However, the insect cloud had been wiped out the moment it entered Xiao Yao Palace. After several attempts, Band realized that he couldn't break into Xiao Yao Palace, so he gave up the idea of invading Xiao Yao Palace. Now that he knew that Qin Chuan and his group had entered Xiao Yao Palace, Band couldn't help but feel a little troubled. If those people hid in Xiao Yao Palace for the rest of their lives, they would never be able to avenge their dead brothers. Sienna knew the situation in Freedom Palace very well. She also knew that most of the Monster Clan and the Demon Clan had gathered in Freedom Palace. As long as they could wipe out the Monster Clan and the Monster Clan in Freedom Palace, they would be invincible in Freedom Secret Land. The restriction in Freedom Palace is too big a threat to us. We have to get rid of it. I know that too. However, the restriction was set up by an expert thousands of years ago. We can't break it. If we can't break it with brute force, we can use a trick to lure those people out. As long as they leave Freedom Palace, they won't be a match for us." Ban shook his head and said, "Unless the insect plague disappears, it's impossible for those people to leave Xiao Yao Palace. I have a way to lure them out." Sienna turned to look at Band and said, "When you were away, I met an interesting person." Upon hearing Sienna's words, Band looked at him in confusion. He was curious about who Sienna was referring to. "Believe me, as long as he is willing to cooperate with us, those people in Freedom Palace will die," Sienna said confidently. Victory was in her hands. "The final victory will be ours. Freedom Palace." Qin Chuan looked in the direction of the front hall curiously. He asked Zhou Lin, who was beside him, "What's going on over there? It looks so lively." "I don't know." Zhou Lin shook her head. "If you're curious, let's go take a look." As Zhou Lin spoke, Chen Chongqing's figure appeared in their field of vision. He walked towards them with small steps. His cautious manner of being afraid of triggering the restriction was rather comical. Boss, Qin Haoshuan is here." Chen Chongqing walked to Qin Chuan's side and said excitedly to Qin Chuan, "You didn't see it just now." When everyone heard that Qin Haoshuan had appeared, they really wanted to eat him alive. It was simply too savage. Qin Chuan was surprised when he heard this. He didn't expect that the commotion in the front hall was caused by Qin Haoshuan's appearance. "What's going on? Tell me." Hee. Qin Haoshuan had no choice but to hide in Freedom Palace to avoid the insect plague. However, he seemed to know that his reputation had been tarnished. He deliberately hid at the foot of the mountain and didn't come up. He was discovered by those who came later. Then, one person spread the news to 10 people, and 10 people spread the news to 100 people. Everyone knew that Qin Haoshuan was also here. So, a group of people went down the mountain to look for Qin Haoshuan. After hearing Chen Chongqing's explanation, Qin Chuan frowned slightly and asked, "What do those people want to do? Don't tell me they want to drive Qin Haoshuan out of Freedom Palace? Who cares about them?" Chen Chongqing said indifferently, "In my opinion, Qin Haoshuan reaped what he sowed. If he didn't seek death, others wouldn't treat him like this. Boss, don't worry about this matter. Let's just watch the show. It will take at least a few hours to walk from the top of the mountain to the foot of the mountain. Maybe some people will regret and come back halfway." Zhou Lin pursed her lips and said to Qin Chuan rationally, "After all, Qin Haoshuan is a member of the Qin clan. Now that they are in the Freedom Secret Realm, they might dare to curse him behind his back. However, when they face him directly, I don't think anyone has the guts to accuse him. After all, when they leave the Freedom Secret Realm, they still have to live under the shadow of the Qin clan. How would they dare to offend Qin Haoshuan?" After hearing Zhou Lin's rational analysis, Chen Chongqing was stunned for a moment. He didn't think too much about it. However, after thinking about it carefully, Zhou Lin's words seemed to make sense. Who cares? Anyway, it's fine as long as he doesn't appear in front of me. Otherwise, I will definitely catch him and give him a good scolding. Chen Chongqing smiled. Others are afraid of the Qin clan, but I'm not. Just as Qin Chuan and the others were chatting, Duan Yusin, who had followed them to join in the fun, came back. She looked at Qin Chuan and said with a strange tone, "Is the Qin clan so scary?" Those people were clamoring to teach Qin Haoshuan a lesson. However, after taking a few steps, they all found an excuse to sneak back. It's really speechless. After hearing this, Qin Chuan asked curiously, "They all sneaked back?" Duan Yusin shook her head, "Not really. Some of the collateral relatives of the Qin clan and some disciples of the aristocratic families attached to the Qin clan all went down the mountain. I guess they didn't come to reprimand Qin Haoshuan, but to welcome him." "It's really disgusting." Zhou Lin sneered and said disdainfully, "This is the face of an aristocratic family's disciple." Looking at the sneer on Zhou Lin's face, Qin Chuan sighed in his heart. He felt that Zhou Lin was a little too paranoid. In fact, not all the people of the aristocratic families were like this. For example, Chen Chongqing, Long Xiao, Su Kuang, and Yi Qingning were also from the aristocratic families. However, they didn't appear to be arrogant or aloof. On the contrary, they could get along very well with each other. They didn't have the arrogance of a young master or a young lady. However, Qin Chuan wouldn't say these words to Zhou Lin. This was because he knew that Zhou Lin hated the aristocratic families very much. Since childhood, she had been instilled with the idea of flattening the aristocratic families and sects so that everyone in the world could get along with each other as equals. Growing up in such an environment, Zhou Lin naturally didn't have a good impression of the people of the aristocratic families and sections. "Big brother, if Qin Haoshuan comes later, what do you plan to do?" Chen Chongqing looked at Qin Chuan. "Do you want to ridicule him?" "There's no need." Qin Chuan shook his head and said to Chen Chongqing, "Let them do whatever they want. I just want to quietly stay here until the insect plague subsides or until the unfettered secret territory closes." Then, he would see if there was a chance to enter the unfettered residence and take the 3 brocade boxes. Of course, Qin Chuan didn't say the last sentence out loud. It wasn't that he didn't trust Chen Chongqing, but this matter was of great importance. At this stage, the fewer people who knew about it, the better. Chapter 455. Princess, Qin Haoshuan has arrived at the square of Front Hall. Ma Jiawen walked to the front of Yaorao, who was sitting on the praying mat, and said in a low voice, "Many people have gone to watch the fun." Hearing Ma Jiawen mentioning Qin Haoshuan, Yaorao slowly opened her eyes and asked, "Is there any reaction from Qin Chuan's side?" "No." Ma Jiawen shook her head and replied, "Qin Chuan and his senior sister are still sitting at the side of Carefree House. They don't have any intention of coming over to watch Qin Haoshuan's fun." "Humph!" Yaorao coldly snorted. "He is actually able to keep his composure." Now, after making inquiries from various parties, Yaorao had basically understood the relationship between Qin Chuan and Qin Haoshuan as well as what had happened between them. In her opinion, Qin Chuan and Qin Haoshuan were absolutely mortal enemies, and it was impossible for them to coexist peacefully. But after hearing about the matter of Qin Haoshuan, Qin Chuan was as calm as Mount Tai. Clearly, it was not because he didn't want to find trouble with Qin Haoshuan, rather he had something more important to do than finding trouble with Qin Haoshuan. Clearly, that more important matter was certainly related to that senior sister of his. If Qin Chuan knew about Yaorao's mental activity at this moment, then perhaps he would be greatly surprised. Because Yaorao's guess was right, he indeed had something more important to do, and it was indeed related to Zhou Lin. But it had nothing to do with romance. He was only thinking about how to take out those 3 brocade boxes from the stone table of Carefree House. "Let's go and take a look." Yaorao stood up and said to several holy sons beside her, "Wait until you see Qin Haoshuan, then ruthlessly ridicule him for me, then ruthlessly praise Qin Chuan. Do you hear me?" Hearing the command of Yaorao, Fei Peng and Bai Feng couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. They were somewhat helpless. At the square of Front Hall, Qin Haoshuan had already freshened up and changed into clean clothes. He looked very elegant and had the demeanor of a noble young master. At his side, several people who were also dressed like noble young masters were surrounding him, and they were chatting with Qin Haoshuan with a smile on their faces. They were sighing about the hardships and difficulties of this trip to Carefree Secret Territory, and completely didn't mention the matter of Little Zhong Mountain. There were some people around them who were watching with cold eyes. Even though they felt disdain in their hearts, they did not say anything. Clearly, they did not want to offend Qin Haoshuan. It's really not easy for Haoshuan to pass through the insect plague and come to Xiao Yao Palace alone. I think you're probably the only one in the world who has such strength. Yes, Haoshuan's life is too difficult. We all have companions to support each other, but he's alone. It's much harder for him. It's difficult for us, but it's as easy as pie for Haoshuan. Ha! As Qin Haoshuan listened to the praises of the people around him, it was as if he had returned to the days when everyone was studying together in school. A confident smile appeared on his face as he humbly said, "It's just some insignificant tricks. It's not worth mentioning, not worth mentioning at all. Indeed, it's not worth mentioning. He's just a scoundrel. Even if he has the face to say it, I might not even want to hear it." Just when everyone was praising Qin Haoshuan, Fei Peng suddenly walked over with a cold smile on his face. He looked at Qin Haoshuan with a disdainful gaze. When everyone saw the sudden appearance of Fei Peng, their expressions became somewhat subtle. Qin Haoshuan's smile stiffened on his face. He looked somewhat embarrassed and distressed. "Demon Clan's thief, don't try to act viciously. Haoshuan is the human clan's heaven's pride. How can you slander him so wantonly?" Someone stood out and angrily rebuked Fei Peng to defend Qin Haoshuan's reputation. This caused Fei Peng to burst into laughter. "Ha ha! This kind of trash deserves to be called a heaven's pride? If he's a heaven's pride, then wouldn't someone as strong as Qin Chuan be a heaven's pride?" Fei Peng laughed heartily. "As for you, you only dare to show off in Xiao Yao Palace. If you were outside, even if I lent you some courage, would you dare to speak to me like this?" That person was rendered speechless by Fei Peng's rebuke. However, Qin Haoshuan's face instantly darkened when Fei Peng mentioned Qin Chuan. When Fei Peng saw the change in Qin Haoshuan's expression, he sneered again and mocked. Why? You seem to be unconvinced? Then why don't you ask the people around you? When you abandoned them and ran away by yourself, who stood out to save them? In my opinion, apart from Qin Chuan, all the so-called heaven's pride of the human clan are worthless. Fei Peng unceremoniously started to mock everyone present. However, everyone was left speechless because what Fei Peng said was right. It was indeed Qin Chuan who stood out to save them when they were in danger. Compared to Qin Chuan, their strength was indeed not strong enough. Fei Peng, what you said is wrong. At this moment, Bai Feng slowly walked over and said to Fei Peng in a somewhat reproachful manner, How can you say that the dignified Qin Chuan of the Qin clan is worthless? When everyone heard Bai Feng's words, they were a little surprised. Who would have thought that someone from the demon clan would actually stand out to speak good words for Qin Haoshuan? However, when they heard Bai Feng's next words, they almost couldn't hold back their laughter. Bai Feng looked at Qin Haoshuan with a smile and said to Fei Peng, If Qin Haoshuan didn't set off Qin Chuan, how could Qin Chuan be so outstanding? When Fei Peng heard Bai Feng's words, he laughed and said, You are right. Qin Haoshuan is indeed somewhat useful. This is called a red flower needs green leaves to set it off. When everyone heard Bai Feng and Fei Peng ridiculing Qin Haoshuan in unison, their expressions became extremely strange. They looked at Qin Haoshuan with a playful expression. Under the circumstances of the prohibition of Xiao Yao Palace, no one was allowed to use force. Therefore, they could only use their mouth. However, Fei Peng and Bai Feng had the upper hand. Qin Haoshuan couldn't say a single word when they refuted with fact. He could only remain silent with an ashen face. Facing the subtle gazes of the crowd and the wanton ridicule of Fei Peng and Bai Feng, Qin Haoshuan felt that he was going to go crazy. If it wasn't for the thunder punishment prohibition of Xiao Yao Palace, he would have definitely taught Fei Peng and Bai Feng a lesson. He would have let them know that trouble comes from careless talk. However, compared to his hatred for Fei Peng and Bai Feng, the person that Qin Haoshuan hated the most was Qin Chuan. If it wasn't for Qin Chuan, he wouldn't be where he was today. If he didn't have the status of being a member of the Qin clan, Qin Haoshuan would be nothing. I think he wouldn't even be qualified to carry Qin Chuan's shoes. Fei Peng seemed to be very good at ridiculing people. Not only were his words sharp, but they were also aimed at Qin Haoshuan's vital points. As long as he belittled Qin Haoshuan, he would definitely praise Qin Chuan. This caused the anger in Qin Haoshuan's heart to rise. Seeing that Qin Haoshuan was about to explode, Fei Peng ridiculed him again. I heard that Qin Chuan is also a member of the Qin clan. Why do you think that even though they are both members of the Qin clan, the one who grew up outside is more outstanding than the one who was carefully nurtured by the Qin clan? Is it because the nurturing policy of the Qin clan is not good, or is it because the person is not good? Chapter 456. Enough! Qin Haoshuan couldn't bear it any longer. He roared angrily. He stared at Fei Peng with a sharp look in his eyes. He wanted to eat Fei Peng alive. Fei Peng chuckled in the face of Qin Haoshuan's angry stare. He didn't take it to heart. He didn't shut up. Instead, he mocked him again. What? Did I poke your sore spot? Is it difficult to admit that you're a piece of trash? I'm not a piece of trash. Qin Haoshuan's expression was ferocious. He said angrily, I'm your savior. Savior? Fei Peng looked at Qin Haoshuan as if he was looking at an idiot. Are you joking with me? Are you worthy of calling yourself a savior? Ha! Fei Peng couldn't stop laughing as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. The other people also had strange expressions on their faces. Who would have thought that Qin Haoshuan would call himself a savior when his reputation had already been ruined? This simply refreshed everyone's understanding of Qin Haoshuan. Qin Haoshuan's face was ashen as he faced the crowd's embarrassed expressions. They wanted to laugh but didn't dare to. He said coldly, I know that all of you have a grudge because I left the battlefield alone. You think that I'm a coward who abandoned everyone and fled. However, have you ever thought that I would have died if I didn't leave in time? If you were in my place, would you be willing to die like this? Everyone's expression became subtle when they heard Qin Haoshuan's shout. It was just as Qin Haoshuan had said. They would have also chosen to run away if they were faced with a life-or-death crisis. They wouldn't have had time to think about other things. Qin Haoshuan had only made a choice that everyone would have made. However, he was spurned by everyone because he was Qin Haoshuan. Perhaps nobody would have thought that he was wrong if he wasn't Qin Haoshuan and was an ordinary person instead. Simply speaking, this was human nature. I was wondering why you were shameless enough to appear in front of everyone. It turns out that you've already found an excuse. I have to say that your starting point is quite unique. It's quite dignified. Bai Feng chuckled and said faintly, You said that you only made a choice that everyone would have made. However, I want to ask you. Who gathered them? Who ordered them to be surrounded? Who ordered them to be surrounded? Could it be that these were the choices that everyone would make? Isn't it because you're biting off more than you can chew? Blinded by greed, you want to borrow the help of everyone to make a name for yourself and restore the image you lost in the 6 Great Academies ranking competition? It's only been a few days and you've already cleared your name? This is the first time I've seen someone who actually believed their own lies. Qin Haoshuan, as expected of you. After hearing Bai Feng's words, the approval that they had for Qin Haoshuan disappeared in a split second. As Bai Feng had said, it was Qin Haoshuan who gathered them in Zijin Palace. It was also Qin Haoshuan who forbade them to leave. It was also Qin Haoshuan who declared that he would lead them to defeat the monster army and spread the name of the human race. Therefore, Qin Haoshuan was the one who brought them to danger and lost his reputation. He didn't deserve any sympathy. When Qin Haoshuan saw everyone's expressions changing, he couldn't help but shout, What are you all thinking? He was a demon, but they were demons. We're mortal enemies with the demon race. Are you all going to listen to the words of these demons? If it weren't for Qin Haoshuan's reminder, everyone would have almost forgotten that Bai Feng and Fei Peng were demons. Don't talk about these useless things. Fei Peng sneered. Xiao Yao Palace has the thunder punishment prohibition and there's an insect plague outside. No matter if it's the human race or the demon race, they're just taking refuge here. In the end, they're all victims. Now that we've forcefully separated the demon race from the human race, do you still dare to attack me? Moreover, regardless of the racial conflict, is there a problem with what we said just now? Majority of people agreed with the words of Fei Peng, but at this time Qin Haoshuan had pointed out the difference between humans and demons, so they were still embarrassed to show their attitude too obviously. Seeing that everyone didn't have any prejudice against Bai Feng and Fei Peng because of the difference between humans and demons, Qin Haoshuan finally couldn't bear it and said angrily, I was in a safe place and could have passed through the insect plague without being invaded. But because of the matter of Shaozhong Mountain, I've always felt guilty towards you all. So I wanted to make it up to you and save you all from the sea of bitterness. You all don't welcome my arrival, but now because of the nonsense of the demon race, you all are doubting me. You all have really disappointed me. Not far away, when Yaorao heard Qin Haoshuan's words, she couldn't help but vomited. She looked at Ma Jiawen beside her, and said with disdain, This Qin Haoshuan is truly shameless. He can turn black into white, and he still feels guilty in his heart? And he still wants to save everyone from the sea of bitterness? Don't tell me he can make the insect plague disappear? Ma Jiawen smiled and said to Yaorao, I thought Qin Chuan was already thick-skinned enough, but I didn't expect there is someone who is even thicker and more shameless than him. What kind of people have come out of Qin clan? Indeed. Yaorao deeply agreed. Qin Chuan is also very shameless. When Yaorao and Ma Jiawen were whispering to each other, Fei Peng also couldn't help but began to ridicule Qin Haoshuan. Don't make me laugh. Don't tell me you aren't ashamed to say these words. Who are you trying to impress by putting on such a righteous look? No need to mention demon race. Even human race felt that Qin Haoshuan was putting too much effort into acting. They could understand Qin Haoshuan's feelings of wanting to clear his name, but Qin Haoshuan treating all of them as fools was somewhat too excessive. Why should I be ashamed? Qin Haoshuan sneered. You demon race don't have a way to solve the insect plague, but that doesn't mean I also don't have a way. Hearing Qin Haoshuan's words, someone couldn't help but ask, You have a way to solve this problem? Qin Haoshuan nodded his head and said in a deep voice, I do have a way to make everyone stop being attacked by the insect plague and move freely. You don't have to hide in Xiao Yao Palace anymore. Originally, I wanted to help everyone because I felt guilty. But now, seeing that everyone has such a deep prejudice and hostility against me, I am a little disheartened. Hearing Qin Haoshuan's answer, that person who asked Qin Haoshuan promptly said, Haoshuan, as long as you can make the insect plague retreat, and let us continue to look for opportunities and treasures in this secret territory, then let bygones be bygones, and we will never mention it again. Yes, that's right. How can we easily believe the words of demon race? Haoshuan, I believe you are a selfless person. When other people saw Qin Haoshuan seem to really have a way to make the insect plague retreat, their attitude also started to waver. Although Qin Haoshuan's previous actions were somewhat improper, but if he could make the insect plague retreat and save everyone, then it could be considered as a good deed. In this way, his merits would offset his demerits. Chapter 457. Looking at Qin Haoshuan's confident look, Bai Feng and Fei Peng couldn't help but look at each other. They both had doubts in their hearts. Could it be that Qin Haoshuan really had a way to control the insect plague? Facing everyone's curiosity and doubts, Qin Haoshuan was expressionless. He said coldly, I have indeed found a way to control the insect plague. If you don't believe me, I can go to the foot of the mountain and demonstrate it to you. After you see it with your own eyes, you will naturally know whether I am lying or not. Seeing Qin Haoshuan so confident, everyone couldn't help but feel a little excited. They had entered the unfettered secret territory to seek opportunities, not to hide from the insect plague in the unfettered palace. There was still more than a month before the unfettered secret territory closed. There were still a lot of opportunities waiting for them to discover outside. Haoshuan, why don't you tell us your method first? Someone stood up and said to Qin Haoshuan, This is also good. It will shut those inhuman guys up. Everyone was well aware of who this inhuman guy was. Fei Peng and Bai Feng were also doubtful about Qin Haoshuan's method of restraining the insect plague, so they didn't refute him for the time being. If Qin Haoshuan couldn't explain himself, they would naturally make Qin Haoshuan feel embarrassed. Seeing that Fei Peng and Bai Feng kept quiet and didn't speak, Qin Haoshuan's face gradually became gentle. Facing everyone's expectant eyes, Qin Haoshuan said indifferently, Actually, it is not a very special method. I relied on this method to come to Carefree Palace without being attacked by the insect plague. While speaking, Qin Haoshuan took out a white thing that was the size of a grain of rice from his storage ring. Everyone looked at the thing in Qin Haoshuan's hand and couldn't help but ask, What is this? When this thing grows up, it will become those insects outside. Qin Haoshuan replied coldly, To put it bluntly, this is the insect egg. Hearing Qin Haoshuan's answer, everyone was shocked. It turned out that the white thing in Qin Haoshuan's hand was the insect egg of those insects outside. While everyone was still in shock, Qin Haoshuan picked up an egg and crushed it. He smeared some milky white juice on his forehead and said to everyone, The flying insects outside use smell to distinguish between friend and foe. As long as we crush these eggs and smear them on our bodies, the flying insects will naturally treat us as their companions and won't attack us. In this way, the insect plague won't be a threat to us. Are you sure you only need to rely on the eggs to move freely outside? Fei Peng couldn't help but ask, How did you know about this? Naturally, it's through various attempts. Qin Haoshuan sneered. After all, I was only thinking about solving the insect plague and making up for the mistakes I made. I'm not like you demons who are only good at talking. When everyone heard Qin Haoshuan's words, their expressions changed slightly. If what Qin Haoshuan said was true, that he was trying to save everyone and found a way to prevent them from being attacked by the insect plague, then they really had no reason to continue being hostile towards Qin Haoshuan. But there are so many of us here. Someone looked at Qin Haoshuan with hesitation. Qin Haoshuan only had a few eggs. It wasn't enough to share. In the face of everyone's doubts, Qin Haoshuan said calmly, I only took out a small part of the insect eggs that I have. It's more than enough for the demon race, let alone the human race. As for replenishment, there are insects everywhere outside. Insect eggs can be seen everywhere. When you use them up, you can just pick one up. Hearing Qin Haoshuan's words, the person who raised the question immediately said with surprise, That's great. In this way we can be saved. We don't have to be trapped in Xiao Yao Palace anymore. Haoshuan, I really didn't misjudge you. I knew that you'll always be our leader. Yes, Haoshuan has never let us down. However, some demons, if you have the ability, don't ask Haoshuan for the eggs. That's right. Humans are humans and demons are demons. We humans and demons are enemies. The expressions on Fei Peng and Bai Feng's faces became extremely awkward when they heard the surrounding conversation. Who would have thought that Qin Haoshuan, who had become the target of public criticism, would actually transform into the savior in everyone's hearts with the help of an insect egg? The situation had reversed too quickly. Fei Peng and Bai Feng also didn't know how to deal with it. They simply turned around and left. If they continued to stay here, then they would become the target of ridicule. Seeing Fei Peng and Bai Feng retreating, Qin Haoshuan couldn't help but sneered and said, I, Qin Haoshuan, have always done things in an open and above-board manner. I will repay evil with good. As long as you demons promise not to stir up trouble in Xiao Yao's secret territory, it's not like I can't give you the eggs and help you escape. However, I don't believe your words. I want Princess Rao to personally tell me. Hearing Qin Haoshuan's words, Fei Peng and Bai Feng glanced at each other. They couldn't help but quicken their pace. Behind them, compliments and praises for Qin Haoshuan were heard. They didn't have the anger and disdain from before. Looking at Fei Peng and Bai Feng, who returned in embarrassment, Yao Rao frowned and said, Is the method that Qin Haoshuan said really feasible? It should be true. Fei Peng replied, He said that he is willing to go to the foot of the mountain to demonstrate. If it is false, then he shouldn't have such confidence. After all, he has already betrayed those humans once. If he lies and teases everyone again, then I'm afraid even the name of his Qin family won't be able to protect him. Hearing Fei Peng's words, the expression on Yao Rao's face couldn't help but become gloomy. If Qin Haoshuan didn't lie, then this time he might really be able to clear his name. Let's go and find Qin Chuan. She wanted to see whether Qin Chuan was anxious or not. Boss, something bad has happened. Chen Chongqing almost ran to the side of Qin Chuan with extreme speed. With a shocked expression on his face, he said to Qin Chuan, Qin Haoshuan unexpectedly relied on his outstanding eloquence to clear his name. Hearing Chen Chongqing, Qin Chuan couldn't help but gawk. Clear his name? What's the situation? Chen Chongqing simply narrated what had happened a moment ago. Hearing this, Qin Chuan was dumbfounded. He really didn't expect that Qin Haoshuan could actually think of using the smell of insect eggs to confuse the flying insect. He had cheated everyone once and saved everyone once. Wasn't this clearing his name? Using the smell of insect eggs to confuse the flying insects doesn't seem to have any problem. Since Qin Haoshuan has the confidence to personally demonstrate it, then I think he shouldn't be deceiving people. Zhou Lin looked towards Qin Chuan and asked, Should we go and take a look? Qin Chuan pondered for a moment, then nodded and said, Let's go and take a look. If this method works, then at that time, the people of Xiao Yao Palace should choose to leave. Then it will be more convenient for us to take action. Hearing this, Zhou Lin meaningfully looked at Qin Chuan. She understood the meaning of Qin Chuan. Chapter 458. Just as Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin were about to go to the front palace square to check out the situation, the front palace square was already crowded with people. Both the human race and the monster race were looking at Qin Haoshuan, who was standing in the center. In the square, Qin Haoshuan felt as if he had returned to the Zijin Palace when he was faced with the expectant gazes of the crowd. He felt as if he had returned to the Zijin Palace. Everyone, seeing is believing. Although I have said a lot just now and everyone has chosen to believe me, I still hope that I can demonstrate to everyone personally and let everyone see that I am not lying. Now, I would like to invite everyone to follow me to the foot of the mountain and witness with your own eyes how I can come and go freely in the insect plague. Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin, who had just arrived at the square, couldn't help but look at each other when they heard Qin Haoshuan's words. After hearing his words, I feel that he is really confident this time. Qin Chuan thought for a while and said to Zhou Lin, I hope that he is serious this time and won't cause any more trouble. Zhou Lin nodded. She agreed with Qin Chuan's words. It would be best if Qin Haoshuan was serious. This way, the people who were trapped in Xiao Yao Palace could be released. In this way, they could set their minds on the 3 brocade boxes in Xiao Yao residence at ease. At this moment, Qin Haoshuan was ready to go down the mountain. Everyone followed beside Qin Haoshuan in a mighty manner. Are you going to watch the show too? At this moment, Lu Zi and the others also walked over. Obviously, they also wanted to see if Qin Haoshuan was telling the truth. Let's go and have a look together. Qin Chuan asked everyone to move together. They wanted to see if Qin Haoshuan could turn the situation around and turn his bad reputation into a good one. Perhaps because they were too anxious, they went down the mountain very quickly. In just over 2 hours, they walked from the top of the mountain to the foot of the mountain. At this moment, standing in front of the memorial arch at the foot of the mountain, everyone could clearly see the flying insects outside. It was a black mass and extremely terrifying. Looking at this scene, the expressions on everyone's faces were extremely ugly because the insect plague had become more and more severe. It was more than 10 times worse than before they came to Xiao Yao Palace. There are so many insects in the sky. If the eggs don't work, once a person walks in, they will probably be gnawed until not even their bones are left, right? Heavens, is Qin Haoshuan really confident in dealing with such a terrifying insect plague? Under everyone's worried and doubtful gazes, Qin Haoshuan did not say anything. He only took out a bug egg, crushed it, and smeared it on his forehead. After that, he walked out of the memorial arch. When everyone saw Qin Haoshuan's actions, they subconsciously started to worry for him. On the other side, Yarao had already quietly walked to the side of Qin Chuan. She took a glance at Zhou Lin, who was standing beside Qin Chuan, then she took a step forward and stood between them. After that, she asked Qin Chuan in a soft voice, Do you think he is really confident in dealing with this insect plague, or is he just pretending to be mysterious? Qin Chuan shot a glance at Yarao, then again looked at expressionless Zhou Lin. After that, he replied, Do you think he will joke around with his own life? In such a terrifying insect plague, even if one had spiritual power shield to protect their body, they would still be instantly swallowed. There was absolutely no possibility of survival. He didn't know about others, but if it was him, then he would absolutely not walk out of the mountain under such circumstances. Hearing Qin Chuan's answer, Yarao turned her head to look at Zhou Lin. After that, she said with a smile, Let's get to know each other, my name is Yarao. Facing Yarao's greeting, Zhou Lin expressionlessly said, I didn't expect that as the princess of Monster Clan, you would be so amiable and approachable. I'll take it as you are praising me. Yarao turned her gaze towards Qin Haoshuan, who was about to walk out of the memorial arch, then asked Zhou Lin, "Do you think he can succeed?" "The more noble a person thinks he is, the more he cherishes his life." Zhou Lin indifferently replied, "He will not joke around with his own life. You seem to have a very big prejudice against people who have relatively good background." Yao Rao somewhat curiously asked, "Actually, not everyone thinks they are noble. For example, just like you said, I am particularly amiable and approachable, and I can play with anyone." Hearing Yao Rao's words, Bai Feng and Fei Ping, who were standing behind her, couldn't help but look at each other in blank dismay. Both of them saw a trace of strange expression on each other's face. Princess Yao Rao is amiable and approachable, and she can play with anyone? Only Princess Yao Rao can say this kind of nonsense. Qin Haoshuan stood under the memorial arch, which was only one step away from insect infestation. Looking at the densely packed flying insects in front of him, he took a deep breath, then took a step forward. Under the attentive gaze of tens of thousands of people, the flying insects around Qin Haoshuan seemed to have encountered a layer of barrier and abruptly retreated. Nearly 1 meter radius around Qin Haoshuan turned into a blank area, and not a single flying insect attacked Qin Haoshuan. Qin Haoshuan laughed, then step by step he freely moved in the sky filled with flying insects. Wherever he went, the flying insects retreated as if tied, appearing exceptionally harmonious. Seeing this scene, everyone simultaneously opened their eyes wide and revealed disbelief expression. When they first heard Qin Haoshuan's method, as a matter of fact, majority of them had the mentality of giving it a try, but now seeing Qin Haoshuan's method was really effective, everyone couldn't help but excitedly cheered. Success! He really succeeded! Oh God! Qin Haoshuan did it! As expected of Qin Haoshuan. When the goblin race heard the cheers of the humans, their expressions became a little strange. They felt that these people in front of them were too realistic. When Qin Haoshuan abandoned them to escape alone, they couldn't wait to cut him into pieces. When Qin Haoshuan appeared with the method to restrain the insect infestation, they couldn't wait to praise him to the heavens. They were really too snobbish. Qin Haoshuan wandered outside for a while before returning to the memorial arch. He looked at everyone and said, "You all saw it, I didn't lie. As long as we have the insect eggs, we can freely move around in the insect infestation. According to my deduction, the smell of one insect egg is enough to allow us to move around freely in the insect infestation for 2 hours. When you notice that the flying insects are approaching you, you just need to apply a new insect egg." Hearing Qin Haoshuan's words, everyone excitedly thanked him. As long as they could avoid the insect infestation and go to a place where there was no insect infestation, they could freely explore the mystery realm and look for opportunities. This was equivalent to giving them a new lease of life. Qin Haoshuan smiled as he looked at the grateful and joyful expressions on everyone's faces. It could be said that he had obtained great satisfaction in his heart. Such a situation where everyone was paying attention to him had come a little late. However, it had finally come. Chapter 459. Qin Chuan frowned slightly as he looked at Qin Haoshuan, who was standing in the crowd. He said in a low voice, "Something is not quite right." Yao Rao smiled faintly as she heard Qin Chuan. She then asked, "Are you jealous of him? In fact, you don't have to. After all, he doesn't have so many beautiful women around him." "No." Qin Chuan shook his head. "His behavior is too strange. As far as I know, Qin Haoshuan has never been a friendly person. He has always looked down on people who aren't from aristocratic families." Zhou Lin suddenly said, "You can see that some of the people surrounding Qin Haoshuan are commoners. However, Qin Haoshuan's attitude towards them is very subtle. His body is welcoming them, but the expression on his face is rejecting them." Everyone subconsciously looked at Qin Haoshuan after they heard Zhou Lin's words. They carefully observed the changes in Qin Haoshuan's facial expression. It was just as Zhou Lin had said. Qin Haoshuan's body didn't have any reaction when he came into contact with commoners. However, it could be seen from his facial expression that he was trying his best to endure something. He isn't used to greeting strangers, right? Chen Chongqing had always felt that Qin Haoshuan wasn't a good person. However, he couldn't see any problem from Qin Haoshuan's facial expression. Bai Yu, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said to everyone while everyone was carefully observing Qin Haoshuan, "There is a problem with his blood." Everyone was stunned when they heard Bai Yu's words. There was a problem with Qin Haoshuan's blood? Facing the puzzled gazes of everyone, Bai Yu explained in a low voice, "I can sense that there's an extremely evil force hidden within his blood." Qin Chuan looked at Bai Yu with a dignified expression and asked, "Can you be a bit more specific?" Bai Yu shook her head and said, "I can only make a rough guess unless I can get his blood to perceive it." "Hey, it can't be right?" Suddenly, LVZ seemed to have thought of something and said with a look of shock, "Think carefully about what he's doing. Connect the dots and diverge your thoughts. If this conjecture is true, then it's too shocking." When everyone heard LVZ's ambiguous words, they lowered their heads and pondered. A moment later, everyone raised their heads at the same time and looked at the insect cloud outside at the same time. "LVZ, isn't your guess a little too terrifying? Don't tell me he's really being controlled by the Zergs?" Chen Chongqing swallowed a mouthful of saliva. His face was filled with horror. If this was true, then what Qin Haoshuan was doing was pushing everyone into the fire. Yarao gloomily looked at Qin Haoshuan and said in deep voice, "Before, I felt that this person's attitude change was somewhat strange. He was even willing to provide us with insect eggs. But I didn't expect that he was actually a wolf with wild ambition and became Zerg's lackey." In Yarao's view, Qin Haoshuan was absolutely not being controlled by Zerg. Rather, he was willing to join hands with Zerg to harm them. If this is true, then he is worse than a beast. Zhou Lin deeply looked at Qin Haoshuan and said to everyone, "We must find a way to expose him. We can't let his scheme succeed." "No, we can't reveal ourselves now." Qin Chuan shook his head and said to everyone, "Look at the performance of those people. They trust Qin Haoshuan very much. If we jump out and accuse Qin Haoshuan now, not only will these people not believe us, they will instead think that we are jealous of Qin Haoshuan. At that time, the matter will become even more troublesome." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Long Shao couldn't help but look outside and said to Qin Chuan, "I have a way to expose Qin Haoshuan's hypocritical face. Everyone, don't worry, I will distribute the insect eggs to you one by one. We will do it one by one." Qin Haoshuan tried his best to maintain the smile on his face. He tried his best to present his friendly side in front of everyone. He had never thought that performing would be such a troublesome thing. It was even easier to make people feel tired than training. In the face of Qin Haoshuan's goodwill, everyone smiled and complimented him. At this moment, the insect disaster outside was no longer a problem in their eyes. As long as they could get through this crisis, they would be able to swim freely in the vast sea and the sky. Just when Qin Haoshuan was distributing the insect eggs to everyone, a quarrel suddenly broke out not far away. "Qin Chuan, I was wrong about you. Long Shao, if not for me saving you, you would have already lost your life." Hearing the quarrel, everyone subconsciously looked towards the source of the quarrel. They saw Qin Chuan and Long Shao were confronting each other. Both of their faces were filled with anger. Seeing this scene, everyone was extremely puzzled. Why were these two people quarreling all of a sudden? Qin Haoshuan was also a little surprised. He hadn't had the time to look for Qin Chuan to put on a good show to let bygones be bygones. Why did this guy take the initiative to jump out? Qin Chuan, although Qin Haoshuan did some very bad things in the past and betrayed many people, he now knows that he was wrong. He is also trying his best to make it up to everyone. Why can't you be more tolerant and forgive him? Why must you have such a big prejudice against him? Long Shao, if you are willing to beg him, then go ahead. I will never lower my head to him. All right, if you don't go, then I will go. When everyone heard this, they understood the cause of the quarrel. Turned out that Qin Chuan saw that Qin Haoshuan had turned over a new leaf. However, he was still unwilling to forgive Qin Haoshuan and was still prejudiced against him. He was unwilling to lower his head to Qin Haoshuan and ask for the insect eggs. On the other hand, Long Xiao felt that there was a problem with Qin Chuan's attitude, so the two of them started quarreling. In fact, everyone could understand Qin Chuan's attitude. After all, Qin Chuan and Qin Haoshuan had a feud during the 6th Great Academy's ranking competition. According to the rumors, Qin Chuan was even abandoned by the Qin clan. In addition to the previous incident at Xiaozhong Mountain, it would be strange if Qin Chuan had a good impression of Qin Haoshuan. As they watched Long Xiao walk towards Qin Haoshuan while panting with rage, the expression in everyone's eyes became a little strange. After all, Long Xiao represented the Long family. If Long Xiao were to side with Qin Haoshuan because of this, Qin Chuan would suffer a great loss. Qin Haoshuan, give me a bug egg. Long Xiao walked in front of Qin Haoshuan and directly asked for the bug egg. Her tone wasn't very gentle, but Qin Haoshuan didn't mind at all. In fact, he was even a little happy. I have long heard of Miss Long's great name. Previously, I regretted that I didn't have the opportunity to get to know you. Now it's not too late. Qin Haoshuan chuckled and handed a bug egg to Long Xiao. Miss Long, please accept it. Long Xiao took the bug egg and turned around to look at Qin Chuan. She coldly said, I really don't want to stay in the same place as you for even a second. Before her voice faded, Long Xiao turned around and walked out of the restricted area. She entered the insect plague. Chapter 460. Everyone sighed when they saw Long Xiao walk directly into the insect plague after receiving the eggs. It was understandable that Qin Chuan didn't want to bow down to Qin Haoshuan. It was also understandable that Long Xiao didn't understand Qin Chuan. After all, people's thoughts were different. It was impossible to forcefully unify them. Just when everyone was sighing in their hearts, Long Xiao had already walked into the insect plague. As expected, those flying insects consciously distanced themselves from Long Xiao. The 1-meter radius around Long Xiao became an empty area. It was exactly the same situation as when Qin Haoshuan entered the insect plague. When Qin Haoshuan saw this scene, he smiled faintly and said to everyone, You have all seen it. This is the magical effect of the insect egg. As long as you crush the insect egg and smear it on your forehead like Miss Long, you will be able to move freely in the insect plague. When everyone heard Qin Haoshuan's words, they all nodded in agreement. If they were still a little worried when Qin Haoshuan was the only one who succeeded, now that they saw another person succeed, they felt a lot more at ease. Although one egg only had 2 hours of effect, there were so many insects outside. Wouldn't it be easy to pick up the eggs? Just when everyone thought that Long Xiao would enter the depths of the insect infestation and leave Xiao Yao Palace, Long Xiao unexpectedly retreated. Seeing Long Xiao's return, everyone's eyes couldn't help but reveal a hint of surprise. However, Long Xiao immediately took a step forward. Seeing Long Xiao's actions, everyone was a little confused. What was he doing? However, before everyone could figure out what was going on, Long Xiao unexpectedly walked back. Under everyone's gazes, Long Xiao squatted down and picked up an object the size of a grain of rice from the ground. When everyone looked at it carefully, they couldn't help but be stunned. Wasn't this the insect egg that Qin Haoshuan had just handed to Long Xiao? Just when everyone was confused, Qin Haoshuan's expression changed greatly. Everyone, look at this. What is this? Long Xiao raised the egg in her hand. This is the egg that Qin Haoshuan handed to me just now. When I went out for the first time, I didn't crush the egg. I just carried it with me. When I went out for the second time, I threw the egg on the ground. You didn't see it wrong. I didn't crush the egg and smear it on my forehead as Qin Haoshuan instructed. Instead, I walked out directly. What happened? The insect plague ignored me. At first, I thought that just carrying the eggs with me would be effective, but when I threw them away and tried again, you saw that I was still safe and sound. The insects were still far away from me. What does this mean? Don't you understand? Everyone was initially stunned when they heard Long Zhao's words. Immediately, they seemed to have thought of something. Their faces suddenly became shocked as they looked at Qin Haoshuan in succession. Even the dumbest person understood that Long Zhao was not lying when they saw Qin Haoshuan's incomparably gloomy expression. The person who was lying was Qin Haoshuan. Qin Haoshuan gritted his teeth fiercely and said in a deep voice, "Long Zhao, I have no enmity with you. Why did you frame me?" Everyone was looking at him with complicated emotions. "Frame you?" Long Zhao sneered. "Justice is in everyone's heart. You have done something wrong. Aren't you afraid that ghosts will come knocking at your door in the middle of the night?" Qin Haoshuan was furious when he heard Long Zhao's words. He was about to attack Long Zhao, but he thought of the thunder punishment prohibition of Xiao Yao Palace. He suppressed his anger and did not attack. At this moment, he really wanted to kill Long Zhao, this vicious woman who had ruined his plan, with his eyes. "Qin Haoshuan, we trusted you so much. How could you deceive us?" Qin Haoshuan, explain. What is going on? If the egg doesn't work, why can Long Zhao move freely in the insect plague? Qin Haoshuan was speechless in the face of everyone's doubts. However, Long Zhao sneered and said, "The reason why I can move freely in the insect plague is very simple. This insect plague didn't appear naturally. It was man-made. Qin Haoshuan colluded with the person behind the insect plague. The person behind the scenes deliberately made the insect plague retreat. His purpose was to trick us. When we believed Qin Haoshuan's words and all of us entered the insect plague, can you imagine what the consequences would be?" Hearing Long Zhao's words, everyone couldn't help but feel a chill run down their spines. In this insect plague that blotted out the sky, their bodies of flesh and blood would probably not even be able to hold on for a breath of time before being completely devoured. Nonsense! Qin Haoshuan shouted angrily and said to everyone, "Don't believe this woman's words so easily. She is slandering me. If you don't believe her, I will do another demonstration." Qin Haoshuan was about to walk into the insect plague when he spoke, but he was stopped by Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan looked at Qin Haoshuan coldly and asked, "Are you going to do a demonstration, or are you going to take the opportunity to escape and return to your partner behind the scenes?" The people who were expecting Qin Haoshuan to do another demonstration were suddenly enlightened when they heard Qin Chuan's words. Qin Haoshuan did not want to do a demonstration. He obviously wanted to take the opportunity to escape. After they understood this, the suppressed anger in everyone's hearts finally erupted uncontrollably. They cursed Qin Haoshuan one after another. "Qin Haoshuan, you are too shameless. You are too insidious. How can there be scum like you in the human race? Qin Haoshuan, I trusted you so much and protected you so much. Is this how you treat my trust in you?" Qin Haoshuan, hurry up and explain. What is the truth? Among the curses, there were also voices that were biased towards Qin Haoshuan. They found it hard to believe that Qin Haoshuan was such a vicious person. They could not accept the fact that Qin Haoshuan wanted to kill all of them in the insect plague. "Shut up, all of you!" After a series of angry shouts, everyone quieted down. Everyone's eyes were focused on the person who shouted. That's right, it was Qin Haoshuan. At this moment, Qin Haoshuan's expression had become extremely ferocious. He even faintly revealed an extremely evil aura. He looked at everyone with hatred, then at the demon race. Finally, he looked at Qin Chuan. He gritted his teeth and said, "You always think that you are infallible and ruin my good deeds. Why do you always go against me and make life difficult for me?" In the face of Qin Haoshuan's question, Qin Chuan pursed his lips and replied, I've never made things difficult for you. You're the one who's always making things difficult for me. You can't become the most outstanding person, so you want to kill those who are more outstanding than you. How can you have such a sick thought? I am sick? If you die, won't my illness be cured? Qin Haoshuan roared hysterically. He really hated Qin Chuan. Chapter 461. At this moment, Qin Haoshuan, who had completely exposed the darkness in his heart, had gone crazy. He didn't want to care about anything else. He just wanted to vent all the anger and jealousy he had towards Qin Chuan. That's right, jealousy. The seventh young master of the Qin clan, the son of the Qilin, Qin Haoshuan, had gone crazy with jealousy towards Qin Chuan. In terms of status, he was the seventh young master of the Qin clan and the future successor of the Qin clan. He was also the star student of the first academy of Star Dragon Academy and was respected by everyone. In terms of strength, he practiced the Qin clan's extreme wind technique and reached the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm before the age of 20. His strength was outstanding. In terms of appearance, he was handsome and elegant. No matter how one looked at it, he was better than Qin Chuan and better than Qin Chuan. However, in the ranking competition of the 6 great academies, Qin Chuan had overshadowed him and become the most glorious person in the world. He was unwilling to accept this. He wanted to take back the glory that should have belonged to him. He had gathered 500 people in the Zijin Palace, and thought that he could destroy Qin Chuan with one hand and deal a heavy blow to the demon race with the other and become famous. However, who would have thought that his plan would change? Not only did he lose his reputation, but he also inadvertently helped Qin Chuan establish great prestige. Now, an opportunity to change the situation was placed in front of him. As long as he could trick all these people into the insect plague and kill them all, the things he had done would not be spread out. No one would know that he had betrayed everyone and lost his reputation. However, who would have thought that Qin Chuan would jump out again and ruin his plan? It could be said that the reason why he had fallen to this point was all because of Qin Chuan. As long as Qin Chuan died, all the problems would be solved. Everyone looked at the hysterical Qin Haoshuan who had gone completely crazy. They were all frightened by the ferocious expression on Qin Haoshuan's face. In their impression, Qin Haoshuan was always a cultured and refined noble young master. They had never seen such a terrifying side of Qin Haoshuan. At this moment, strands of black fog were emitted from Qin Haoshuan's body, making him look even more sinister. He had completely turned into a demon and had lost all humanity. Oh no, Qin Chuan, be careful. He's been controlled by that evil power and has gone mad. When Bai Yu noticed the changes in Qin Chuan's body, she immediately cried out in alarm and reminded Qin Chuan to be careful. Before Bai Yu finished speaking, an extremely powerful aura suddenly burst out from Qin Haoshuan's body. His entire body was shrouded in a layer of gray and black mist, and he looked extremely strange and sinister. Ha 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 ha! Qin Haoshuan laughed maniacally. He stared sharply at Qin Chuan and said sinisterly, he. Qin Chuan, do you feel it? Do you know how powerful and terrifying I am? Do you think you're a match for me? Qin Chuan looked at Qin Haoshuan with a subtle expression and said, This is Xiao Yao Palace. There is a thunder punishment prohibition here. Do you dare to attack me? When Qin Haoshuan heard Qin Chuan mention the thunder punishment prohibition, he smiled coldly and said, I really don't dare to attack you in Xiao Yao Palace. However, you'd better never leave Xiao Yao Palace. Otherwise, I will definitely kill you and cut you into pieces. Qin Chuan shook his head and said, You misunderstood me. I know you don't dare to attack me in Xiao Yao Palace. However, what I want to say is that just because you don't dare to attack me, it doesn't mean that I don't dare to either. Before Qin Chuan finished speaking, his body had already jumped up and pounced on Qin Haoshuan. Under Qin Haoshuan's astonished gaze, Qinchuan's fist accurately hit his face. An extremely violent force erupted and smashed him to the ground. At the same time, a thunderbolt descended from the sky and bombarded Qinchuan's head. However, what was surprising was that Qinchuan didn't seem to be affected by the thunder punishment prohibition. He was extremely calm, as if nothing had happened. Qin Haoshuan fell to the ground. He stared in shock at Qinchuan, who was unaffected by the power of the lightning punishment. He seemed to have thought of something and suddenly jumped up. However, the moment he jumped up, the power of the lightning punishment fell and hit his head with a loud bang. The grayish-black evil fog around him was instantly destroyed. Ah! Qin Haoshuan was bombarded by the thunder punishment prohibition. His whole body was in great pain and he couldn't help but let out an extremely miserable howl. Seeing this scene, Qinchuan couldn't help but laugh. He said indifferently, "I'm not affected by the thunder punishment prohibition. However, this doesn't mean that you're not affected by it. You're really stupid." Qin Haoshuan laid on the ground and stared at Qinchuan with extremely resentful eyes. He cursed Qinchuan. "Qinchuan, you'll die a horrible death. You'll die a horrible death. Before I die a horrible death, I'll kill you first." Qinchuan sighed faintly. Back then, he didn't kill Qin Haoshuan in the 6 Great Academies ranking competition. He didn't expect that today, he would have to make up for his regret in the carefree secret realm. Facing Qinchuan, who didn't conceal his killing intent at all, Qin Haoshuan's resentful face finally revealed a touch of fear. He shouted loudly, "You can't kill me! You don't dare to kill me! I'm the 7th young master of the Qin clan. I'm your elder cousin. You can't kill me!" Everyone looked at Qin Haoshuan's fearful appearance, and their emotions were extremely complicated. Some were moved, some were disdainful, and some were despising him. At this moment, Qin Haoshuan was as laughable as a stray dog in their eyes. He didn't have any backbone and was weak and incompetent. At this moment, everyone was very clear that Qinchuan was determined to kill Qin Haoshuan. It was useless for anyone to stand out and stop him. Everyone was silently watching Qinchuan walk towards Qin Haoshuan step by step. They were waiting for Qinchuan to raise the butcher's knife in his hand. At this moment there was a drastic change in the insect plague outside. The densely packed flying insects rushed towards Carefree Palace as if they had gone mad. The moment the flying insects swarmed over, they triggered the thunder punishment prohibition of Carefree Palace. Thunder rolled and turned a large number of flying insects into ashes in an instant. However, although the thunder punishment prohibition was powerful, there were too many flying insects. The thunder punishment prohibition couldn't eliminate all the flying insects in an instant. When everyone saw this scene, they retreated in fear. They were afraid that they would be punished by the thunder punishment prohibition because of the approaching flying insects. They were afraid that they would be affected by the thunder punishment prohibition. However, Qinchuan didn't retreat. Instead, he advanced and rushed towards Qin Haoshuan. When Qin Haoshuan saw Qinchuan quickening his pace towards him, he couldn't help but reveal a touch of fear on his face. He gritted his teeth and jumped up from the ground. He actually pounced towards the flying insects. Rumble! When the thunder punishment prohibition fell, it should have struck Qin Haoshuan's head. However, it was blocked by the densely packed flying insects. Qin Haoshuan survived. Qinchuan stood in the same place and watched Qin Haoshuan's figure walk out of Carefree Palace under the protection of the flying insects. Qinchuan couldn't help but say angrily, "Qin Haoshuan, you are trying to eliminate yourself from the human race." Chapter 462. Qin Haoshuan had already turned into a demon. In order to survive, he no longer cared about anything else. Facing Qinchuan's angry roar, he started to laugh crazily. "Ha ha 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 ha, I'll end my own life as a human. If I die, then I'll truly end my own life." While laughing crazily, Qin Haoshuan's figure had already left the area covered by the restrictive spell of Xiao Yao Palace. He entered the insect plague and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Seeing this scene, Qin Huan's face couldn't help but turn gloomy. If he had known that Qin Haoshuan would directly side with Zerg in order to survive, he would have killed Qin Haoshuan first to prove everything. However, it was a little too late to say this now. At this moment, when the people who were retreating saw Qin Haoshuan rely on the power of the insect plague to avoid the thunder punishment restrictive spell and escape, they completely recognized Qin Haoshuan's true colors and started to curse him. Among the angry curses, there were also people who were in despair. Now that they knew that Qin Haoshuan's method of restraining the insect plague was just a scam, didn't that mean that they still couldn't leave Xiao Yao Palace? At this moment, the insect plague outside Xiao Yao Palace suddenly retreated like a tide. Immediately after, two ugly figures appeared outside the archway and attracted everyone's attention. Looking at the extremely ugly figures with shells all over their bodies, everyone was a little confused. However, when they saw Qin Haoshuan standing behind the two figures with a face full of hatred, everyone instantly understood that these two people must be the masterminds behind the insect plague. They must be the bastards who colluded with Qin Haoshuan. Qin Chuan. Qin Haoshuan stared at Qin Chuan with hatred. If it wasn't for the fact that his strength didn't allow him to do so, he really wanted to tear Qin Chuan into pieces and feed him to the insects. Facing Qin Haoshuan's angry roar, Qin Chuan completely ignored Qin Haoshuan. He looked at Sienna and Band with a gloomy gaze and said coldly, "You finally dare to show yourself." "Yes, we're here." Sienna glared at Qin Chuan with eyes full of hatred and fury. "You ruined our plan and killed Cook. You must die." Qin Chuan was a little surprised to hear Sienna's words. He remembered that these Zerg warriors could not speak their language before, but not only could they understand them now, they could even communicate with them fluently. Their learning ability was too strong. Qin Chuan could not help but look at Qin Haoshuan. He thought that this matter should be related to Qin Haoshuan. At this time, everyone was surprised to hear the conversation between Qin Chuan and the Zerg warriors. It sounded like Qin Chuan had a grudge against these ugly people, and he even ruined their plans and killed their companions. While everyone was puzzled, Yi Qingning walked out and said to everyone, "The ugly people standing outside are aliens called Zerg. They are the natural enemies of us humans and shifters. The disaster during the Great Chaos Era 10,000 years ago was caused by the invasion of these Zerg." Zerg? The disaster during the Great Chaos Era? Everyone was in disbelief when they heard Yi Qingning's words. They had never heard of Zerg before, and they did not know much about the disaster during the Great Chaos Era. If the disaster during the Great Chaos Era was caused by the invasion of these aliens called Zerg, wouldn't the reappearance of these aliens mean that the disaster from 10,000 years ago was very likely to happen again? Little girl, don't be too harsh with your words. You humans are just a low-leveled civilization, while we, the Holy Ones, are a high-leveled civilization. We came to your world as messengers. As long as you are willing to accept our goodwill, you humans will definitely become a high-leveled civilization in the universe." Sienna looked at Yi Qingning with a sinister gaze. His expression was as sinister as it could get. As soon as Sienna finished speaking, a commotion broke out among the crowd. Initially, some people were still skeptical of Yi Qingning's words, but now that Sienna had taken the initiative to admit that their invasion had caused the disaster during the Great Chaos Era, it meant that these ugly aliens were indeed their enemies. Qin Haoshuan, on the other hand, had secretly sided with the enemies of the human race long ago, and even wanted to harm them. At that moment, everyone's hatred for Qin Haoshuan increased to a whole new level. "Aren't you afraid that I will kill you now that you have appeared in front of me?" Qin Chuan looked at Sienna coldly. "Do you really think that I will be afraid of the insect disaster that you created?" "Qin Chuan, don't be too arrogant." Ban took a step forward and said coldly, "We are giving you a chance. As he spoke, Ban shifted his gaze from Qin Chuan to the crowd and said loudly, "Humans and goblins, listen up. The arrival of the Holy Ones is like a gift from heaven to you. It is an auspicious sign. If you don't want to die, you'd better not make any unnecessary resistance." F*CKU. Before Ban could finish his sentence, some people could not help but jump out and curse at Ban. If they chose to surrender to Zerg, how different would they be from Qin Haoshuan and the others? "You're courting death." Ban looked at the people who were cursing with a sinister gaze. "In this unfettered secret realm, none of you are our match. Angering us will only make you die faster. Only by submitting to us will you have a chance to live." "A chance to live? Hee, are you talking about becoming your lackeys like Qin Haoshuan? We'd rather die and be devoured by the worms than become your lackeys." Qin Haoshuan, who was standing behind Ban, could not help but feel angry when he heard them calling him a lackey. If he had any other choice, he would not be willing to become Ban and Sienna's lackey. However, he had no other choice. If he did not become Ban's lackey, he would die. Even if he died, he would die after Qin Chuan. Thinking of this, Qin Haoshuan could not help but stand up and shout angrily at the crowd, "It's okay if you don't want to surrender. As long as you're willing to hand over Qin Chuan, I can guarantee that all of you can leave unfettered secret realm alive." Bah! Before Qin Haoshuan could finish his sentence, he was rudely interrupted. "You're a traitor who betrayed the human race. How dare you try to sow discord between us? Do you still think you're the Qilin's son of the Qin family? Traitor! Traitor, you'll die a horrible death. Sooner or later, you'll become an ugly monster like him. How did the Qin family produce such a scum like you? Have you ever thought about your family?" Qin Haoshuan's voice was completely drowned out by the cursing. At this moment, he had completely disappointed everyone. Chapter 463. Whoosh! Amidst the angry curses of the crowd, Qin Chuan's figure shot out like a ghost and approached Ban almost instantly. The moment Qin Chuan moved, Ban subconsciously made a defensive move. However, although he blocked Qin Chuan's iron fist, he could not block Bai Yu's attack. Bang! Bai Yu took out a silver stick from somewhere and smashed it hard on Ban's shoulder. Although Ban's hard carapace blocked most of the impact, the violent shock caused Ban's body to be slightly uncoordinated. Qin Chuan seized this opportunity and punched Ban in the face. The power of thunder surged out and instantly rushed into Ban's eyes, destroying both of Ban's eyeballs. Ban's eyes were severely injured, and he could not help but let out a painful howl. Just as Qin Chuan and Bai Yu wanted to take advantage of the situation and kill Ban, Sienna, who had already reacted, shouted angrily. The insect plague that had retreated surged forward again, covering the sky and the earth. Seeing that the insect plague had arrived and Sienna had come to help, Qin Chuan immediately said to Qin Haoshuan, "Qin Haoshuan, kill them all. Zerg, I promise I won't kill you. Everyone will forgive you, and you will become a hero of the human race." Hearing Qin Chuan's angry roar, Qin Haoshuan, who was standing at the back, was moved. If he had a choice, he would not want to become a traitor that everyone despised. Everyone's reaction had clearly told him that he had embarked on a path of no return. However, Qin Chuan's words now gave him hope that he could be forgiven by everyone and become the seventh young master of the Qin family again. Just as Qin Haoshuan had this thought in his mind, a piercing pain made his face turn pale instantly. He opened his mouth and let out a miserable cry. Seeing this scene, Qin Chuan knew that Qin Haoshuan had completely fallen into Zerg's control and could not be counted on. Therefore, he gave Bai Yu a timely look, and the two of them quickly retreated into the restrictive barrier of Freedom Palace before the insect plague arrived. Under the protection of the insect plague, Ban stared at Qin Chuan with his remaining 4 intact eyes and shouted angrily, "Qin Chuan, I will kill you!" Qin Chuan had no intention of paying any attention to Ban's roar. There was no point in arguing with him. Under the archway, Qin Chuan looked at the insect plague outside expressionlessly. He was extremely irritated. This time, Band and Sienna took the initiative to appear, and they failed to kill each other. It would be difficult to find such an opportunity next time. Don't think too much about it. If you miss it this time, you'll be fine the next time. Zhou Lin looked at Qin Chuan and said guiltily, I was a little slow to react. Otherwise, I could have killed them. At that time, Zhou Lin was quite a distance away from the memorial arch, so it was difficult for her to launch an attack without triggering the lightning punishment restriction. By the time she had the chance to attack, the insects had already swarmed over. Otherwise, even if the three of them could not kill both Sienna and Band, it would not be a problem to kill Band. It's not your fault. I just wanted to give it a try. I didn't expect to be able to kill them. Qin Chuan did not care about this matter. Even if Zhou Lin attacked at that time, she might not have the chance to kill Band. Therefore, Zhou Lin's attack did not have much impact on the outcome. What do you think now? Zhou Lin looked at the insect plague outside, and her face was a little gloomy. Nothing for now, but we can try to enter Xiao Yao Palace. Qin Chuan pursed his lips and said to Zhou Lin, we can't do anything about the insect plague outside. We can only think of other ways to solve the problem. The 3 brocade boxes in Xiao Yao residence might bring us some surprises. Qin Chuan had thought of trying to enter Xiao Yao Palace after everyone had left. However, it was impossible for the others to leave Xiao Yao Palace in a short period of time. If they continued to wait, they might have to wait until the Xiao Yao secret realm closed. You're right. Zhou Lin nodded. We have to try. Just as the two were chatting, Lu Zi came from not far away and said to the two, everyone is going to return to the square in front of Xiao Yao Palace. You guys can come with us. Also, they want to discuss with us about how to deal with the insect plague in Zerd. Lu Zi was referring to the human race. Now that Qin Haoshuan had betrayed them, and Yi Qingning and Su Kuang were obviously close to Qin Chuan, they could only pin their hopes on Qin Chuan. They hoped that Qin Chuan would have a good way to solve the problem at hand. Qin Chuan nodded and said, good, I also have something to say to everyone. If he wanted to enter Xiao Yao residence, he would definitely cause a big commotion. Therefore, it was better to discuss some things with the others in advance to avoid some trouble. Slap. Sienna extended his hand and slapped Qin Haoshuan's face. The huge force caused Qin Haoshuan to fall to the ground. He opened his mouth and spat out a bloody tooth. Bastard, you actually wanted to betray us just now? Sienna said to Qin Haoshuan fiercely, you're destined to be our slave for the rest of your life. If you dare to betray us, I'll definitely make you suffer. Qin Haoshuan raised his head and looked at Sienna angrily. He said angrily, slave? I'm your partner. Partner? Sienna seemed to have heard a big joke. He sneered and said to Qin Haoshuan disdainfully, do you think you're worthy of being our partner? You're just a lowly creature from a low-level civilization. Don't think too highly of yourself. Qin Haoshuan's face turned green and purple in the face of Sienna's unrestrained mockery. While he was remorseful, he also developed an endless hatred for Qin Chuan. If Qin Chuan had not deliberately tempted him to betray them, Sienna might not have fallen out with him. Just as Qin Haoshuan was thinking about these things, Band walked over and grabbed his neck. He said coldly, I'll only give you 10 days. You have to think of a way to lure Qin Chuan out. If you can't do it, I'll gouge out your eyes to make up for my own. Listen carefully, you only have 10 days. After saying that, Band pushed Qin Haoshuan to the ground again and kicked Qin Haoshuan's body. Although he didn't use much strength and it didn't hurt, it still hurt Qin Haoshuan's heart deeply. It also made Qin Haoshuan hate Qin Chuan even more. It's all Qin Chuan's fault. Chapter 464. On the square in front of Xiao Yao Palace, everyone looked at Qin Chuan and the others who were slowly walking over. Their expressions were extremely complicated. They did not expect that not only did Qin Chuan save most of them in Xiaozhong Mountain, but he also fought a great battle with Zerg, indirectly saving them and even the human world. It was no exaggeration to say that with what Qin Chuan had done, he was definitely worthy of being called a hero. Under everyone's complicated gazes, Qin Chuan slowly walked to the center of the crowd and stopped. He looked around and said to everyone, "I know that everyone must have a lot to say and want to ask me. Now I'll explain some things. If you have anything you don't understand, you can ask me." After saying this, Qin Chuan did not care about the others' reactions and directly said, "First, the reason why I'm not affected by Xiao Yao Palace's lightning punishment restriction is because my talent Rune is of the lightning attribute. I have a certain resistance to the lightning punishment restriction. Second, Zerg's matter is absolutely true. Whether you believe it or not, this is my answer. Third, the previous killing of Zerg's warriors was not done by me alone. The shifters were also involved. Let's not talk about the outside world for now. Now that we're in Xiao Yao's secret realm, before we eliminate Zerg, I hope that everyone can temporarily put aside their prejudices against each other and work together to fight against Zerg. Alright, I've finished speaking. Is there anything else you want to ask?" When everyone heard Qin Chuan's 3 explanations, a look of understanding appeared on their faces. Qin Chuan's talent Rune was of the lightning attribute. This was not a secret. Everyone could understand and accept that Qin Chuan could resist and even be immune to the lightning punishment restriction. Although they did not know much about Zerg, they could tell that Qin Chuan and the others were not lying based on the performance of the 2 Zerg's warriors. As for what Qin Chuan said at the end about joining forces with the shifters to fight against Zerg, although everyone felt a little uncomfortable in their hearts, it was not unacceptable. After all, Qin Chuan had also said that the matter of joining forces was limited to the carefree secret realm and would not be discussed outside for the time being. While everyone was thinking about these things, Qin Chuan had been silently observing everyone's expressions. He could tell that everyone accepted his 3 explanations. "Qin Chuan, we can understand these things. We are also very grateful for your silent contributions to everyone. However, now that the insect plague is wreaking havoc outside and we are trapped in Xiao Yao Palace, how are we going to fight against Zerg?" Someone raised their doubts to Qin Chuan. Before solving the problem of the insect plague, they had no way of leaving Xiao Yao Palace. How could they fight against Zerg? This person's question was also what everyone was thinking. For everyone, solving the problem of the insect plague was definitely the most important thing at the moment. Qin Chuan gently shook his head and said, "I also want to solve the problem of the insect plague, but I am not omnipotent. This kind of thing requires the combination of everyone's wisdom. All I can do is try my best." Although everyone had expected Qin Chuan's answer, they were still a little disappointed when they heard it. After all, Qin Chuan had helped everyone solve the crisis time and time again. Now that they encountered another crisis, everyone naturally hoped that Qin Chuan could stand up again. However, everyone was just thinking about it. They did not make any excessive requests of Qin Chuan. Seeing the disappointment on everyone's faces, Qin Chuan pondered for a moment and said to everyone, "I want to make a bold attempt. If it succeeds, it might be able to solve the problem of the insect plague." After hearing Qin Chuan's words, the depressed crowd's eyes suddenly lit up. They all asked Qin Chuan what method he had. However, there were also some people who maintained a neutral attitude. After all, Qin Haoshuan's example was right in front of them. They did not want to fall into despair after gaining hope. Facing everyone's enthusiasm, Qin Chuan raised his hand and signaled everyone to be quiet. After everyone had quieted down, he continued, "I only said that it is possible. I am not completely sure. So I hope that everyone can maintain a rational attitude and not have too much hope. We have already experienced a series of setbacks. Our mentality has already calmed down. Qin Chuan, if you have any ideas, just say it. Yes, yes. The worst outcome for us now is to be trapped in Xiao Yao Palace. If you have any ideas, just say it. Qin Chuan, everyone still trusts you. If you need any help, just say it. Hearing everyone's answer, Qin Chuan pursed his lips. I do need everyone's help. It is also a very simple help. That is, don't be greedy. Don't be greedy? When everyone heard Qin Chuan's words, they were extremely surprised. What did he mean? Facing everyone's doubts, Qin Chuan looked at everyone with a subtle expression and said, I may have a way to enter Xiao Yao Palace. Qin Chuan's words were like a heavy bomb in the crowd, instantly exploding the whole place. Everyone could not help but exclaim. For thousands of years, countless people had tried to enter Xiao Yao Palace but failed. Now, Qin Chuan actually said that he had a way to enter Xiao Yao Palace. Looking at the noisy crowd, Qin Chuan raised his hand several times to signal everyone to be quiet, but he was unable to make them quiet down. Left with no choice, he could only jump up. Accompanied by a rumbling sound of thunder, the front hall square finally quieted down. Everyone shut their mouths and looked at Qin Chuan, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground refining the thunder punishment force. Their expressions were extremely subtle. Everyone could see that Qin Chuan's confidence in entering Xiao Yao Palace had a lot to do with his resistance to the thunder punishment restriction. After refining the thunder punishment force with the thunder-devouring art, Qin Chuan stood up again and said to everyone, this thunder punishment restriction has a total of 9 layers. What I experienced just now was only the 3rd layer. According to my deduction, the thunder punishment restriction of Xiao Yao Palace should have the power of the 9th layer. If any of you can withstand the bombardment of the 9th layer, you can also enter Xiao Yao Palace. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, everyone shook their heads like a rattledrum. It was already difficult for them to withstand the bombardment of the 1st layer of the thunder punishment restriction, let alone the most violent 9th layer. Moreover, no one felt that Qin Chuan was lying, because the thunder punishment force that Qin Chuan triggered just now was indeed much more violent than before. If no one has any objections, I will try to enter Xiao Yao Palace after enduring the first 8 layers of the thunder punishment force. If I succeed in obtaining the treasures in Xiao Yao Palace, I will not take them for myself. I will distribute them to the most suitable people. Qin Chuan looked at everyone and said seriously, if anyone has any objections, you can raise them now. If there are any objections later, I will ignore them. Chapter 465. Everyone looked at each other in dismay when they heard Qin Chuan's words, but no one dared to raise any objections. After all, Qin Chuan was the one who had to bear the power of the thunder punishment. Qin Chuan was also the one who had a way to enter the carefree residence. They weren't qualified to raise any objections to Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan, I don't care about others, I support you. If anyone thinks that they can bear the power of the thunder punishment and enter the carefree residence, I will also support you. That's right, I'm not supporting Qin Chuan, I'm supporting people like Qin Chuan. If anyone thinks that they aren't worse than Qin Chuan, you can stand up now. If you don't stand up now, when Qin Chuan distributes the treasures, you will become the enemy of the whole world. Hearing everyone's words, a few people in the crowd were tempted. Their talent runes were also of the rare thunder attribute. If Qin Chuan could resist the power of the thunder punishment, then they might be able to. If they could resist the power of the thunder punishment and enter the carefree residence, then wouldn't it be, thinking of this, someone couldn't resist the temptation of treasures and stood up, saying to Qin Chuan, I also have a thunder attribute talent rune, I want to give it a try. Seeing someone take the initiative to stand up, everyone was somewhat surprised, but after hearing this person's words, they felt relieved. After all, this person also had a thunder attribute talent rune, so it was understandable that he wanted to give it a try. Qin Chuan looked at the person who stood up and faintly smiled. Okay, I don't have any objections if you want to try. If you can do it, then I'm willing to give this opportunity to you. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, everyone praised Qin Chuan. If it was Qin Haoshuan, he would have already stomped his feet in anger. Seeing that Qin Chuan had agreed, that person immediately revealed an excited expression. He looked up at the sky and tried to gently jump up. Boom! A tiny bolt of lightning descended from the sky and struck his head. He only had time to let out a blood-curdling scream before he fainted on the spot. He couldn't even hold on for a second, let alone resist the power of the lightning punishment. Looking at the charred figure on the ground, everyone's faces revealed a touch of horror. They all had thunder attribute talent runes, but why was the gap so big? Others were surprised, but Qin Chuan wasn't surprised. Although this person also had a thunder attribute talent rune, first of all, his body wasn't strong enough to help him resist the power of the thunder punishment. Secondly, his cultivation method wasn't the thunder-devouring art, so it couldn't help him quickly refine the power of the thunder punishment 2's power to absorb the power of the thunder punishment. However, although he wasn't surprised, Qin Chuan still looked very worried. He went forward to check the person's condition. After confirming that the person had just fainted and wasn't in danger, he said to everyone, "He's not dead, he's just fainted. He'll be fine after taking some medicine and resting." After saying that, Qin Chuan stood up and looked at the other people who were eager to try. He asked, "Who else wants to try?" The few people who were originally somewhat tempted shook their heads. What a joke! The first power of the thunder punishment was already so terrifying. Who would be in the mood to try? Qin Chuan, we think you should do it. We all believe in your strength and character. Yes, I think we shouldn't try. Time is precious now. Let's do it as soon as possible. Seeing that no one was willing to try, Qin Chuan smiled and said to everyone, "Since no one is willing to try, I'll do it. Now, I'll trigger the power of the thunder punishment one by one. Everyone better stay away from me to avoid accidental injury." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, everyone stepped back without hesitation. With Qin Chuan as the center, a large empty space was cleared. At this time, everyone looked at Qin Chuan with anticipation. They wanted to see with their own eyes how Qin Chuan would trigger the 9th power of the thunder punishment. After seeing that everyone had stepped back far enough, Qin Chuan didn't wait any longer and directly jumped up. Rumble! A bucket-thick thunder punishment fell down from the sky, illuminating the entire front hall square with azure color. Everyone looked at that thunder punishment which was about to strike Qin Chuan's body and subconsciously trembled. Their face exposed a frightened expression. If this thunder punishment were to fall on their body, then perhaps they would be directly struck into flying ash. After the thunder punishment slowly dissipated, everyone once again saw the figure of Qin Chuan. They saw Qin Chuan was sitting cross-legged on the ground. His whole body was flickering with lightning, which was exceptionally mystical. Seeing this scene, everyone was thoroughly convinced by Qin Chuan. For thousands of years, Qin Chuan was absolutely the first person who could calmly face the power of thunder punishment. Not far away, Yaorao was standing on the stairs looking at Qin Chuan, who was sitting upright on the ground refining the power of thunder punishment. Her eyes flashed with a touch of brilliance, and she said in low voice, "This little thief really brings me pleasant surprises again and again. I really didn't expect that he would actually be able to think of this kind of method to enter Carefree House." Hearing Yaorao, Ma Jiawen said in low voice, "Princess, if Qin Chuan really obtained the treasure of Carefree House, then what should we do?" Although they had once fought side by side before, and could also be regarded as comrade in arms, but in the face of practical benefits, talking about feelings was meaningless. Having heard Ma Jiawen, Yaorao turned to look at Ma Jiawen and said, "He obtained the treasure with his own ability, could it be that we have to snatch it?" Princess, I don't mean that, I just want to fight for our demon race. After all, Qin Chuan had said before that he would distribute the treasure to the most suitable person. Then what if our demon race has a more suitable choice than human race? Will he choose demon race or human race? Ma Jiawen said to Yaorao, I think we should take the initiative to fight for it. I understand what you mean, Yaorao indifferently said, but it's not necessary. Ma Jiawen still wanted to say something, but Yaorao deeply looked at her and said, Don't forget, we have already obtained the most precious treasure of this carefree secret territory, so there is no need to think about the things of Carefree House. Hearing Yaorao say so, Ma Jiawen no longer insisted and calmed down. Yaorao once again turned her gaze towards Qin Chuan. At this moment, Qin Chuan had already successfully refined the power of 4th layer of Thunder Punishment, and was preparing to trigger the power of 5th layer of Thunder Punishment. Rumble. Compared to before, Thunder Punishment power several times more violent fell down with a loud bang, completely submerging Qin Chuan. Even though everyone was separated by several tens of meters, they still felt a kind of paralysis feeling, and all the hairs on their bodies stood erect. But Qin Chuan, who was in the center of Thunder Punishment power, was still expressionless as before. After all, he had already experienced the power of 9th layer of Thunder Punishment power, so now this little bit of Thunder Punishment power was merely a drizzle for him. Chapter 466. Rumble. The power of the Thunder Punishment descended, illuminating the entire Xiao Yao Palace in an azure blue color, piercing everyone's eyes. Sizzle. The violent power of the Thunder Punishment came down clearly, surging on the ground of the front palace square, spreading in all directions like water. At this moment, the crowd surrounding Qin Chuan had already retreated far away, leaving almost the entire front palace square to Qin Chuan. If they were to be affected, it would be no laughing matter. Lu Zi narrowed her eyes slightly, looking at the raging power of the Thunder Punishment in the front palace square, and said with some worry, This is already the 8th level of the Thunder Punishment. Can Qin Chuan withstand it? Facing Lu Zi's question, Zhou Lin, who was standing at the side, answered, Previously, Qin Chuan had withstood the 9th level of the Thunder Punishment. Although he looked a little miserable, he did withstand it. The 8th level of the Thunder Punishment shouldn't have too much of an impact on him. Lu Zi looked at Zhou Lin with a complicated expression, and said in a low voice, Does Qin Chuan really have a way to pass through the restriction of Xiao Yao residence? Zhou Lin heard this and sighed. If it weren't for the fact that there was no other way, I wouldn't have agreed to let Qin Chuan make such a risky attempt. Now all of them were trapped in Xiao Yao Palace. The outside world was full of insects, and they couldn't get out at all. Now, their only hope was in Xiao Yao residence. If they could get a treasure from Xiao Yao residence that could restrain the insects, they still had a chance to kill the remaining Zerg and completely eliminate the threat. But if they couldn't get it, then they could only sit in Xiao Yao Palace and wait for God to open his eyes. Lu Zi also agreed with Zhou Lin's words. But what she couldn't accept was that every time they were in danger, except for Qin Chuan, no one could stand up to solve the crisis. Qin Chuan was really too tired and worked too hard. Being able to do what ordinary people can't, this is boss. Chen Chongqing sighed and said, When I called boss my boss, it was just a joke. But after going through so many things, boss really became my boss, and only he is qualified to be my boss. Long Xiao looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle expression and said in a low voice, Qin Chuan is indeed a very charming person. He is still a little immature now, but I believe that after he grows up, he will be an excellent leader. It's a pity that such a man like him is too rare. If there weren't so many competitors, I wouldn't mind having something happen between me and Qin Chuan. Hearing Long Zhao's straightforward and bold words, Long Zhao's Long Xiao Yao Palace, Long Yi Qing Ning walked among the crowd. When she saw the figure sitting in the corner and cultivating peacefully, her eyes couldn't help but reveal a subtle look. Shue shue. Yi Qing-ning called out softly. The girl sitting in the corner slowly opened her eyes and looked at Yi Qing-ning. She smiled and said, Qing-ning. The girl called Xue Xue by Yi Qing-ning was none other than Wang Wenxue. Previously, Wang Wenxue was by Yi Qing-ning's side. Later, she retreated with everyone in Xiaozhong Mountain and came to Xiao Yao Palace to avoid the insect plague. During this time, Yi Qing-ning stayed by Qinchuan's side and didn't have the chance to meet Wang Wenxue. At this time, Qinchuan was busy refining the power of the thunder punishment, which gave her a chance to reunite with Wang Wenxue. Yi Qing-ning came to Wang Wenxue's side and sat down. She whispered to Wang Wenxue, Xue, did you see it? Wang Wenxue knew what Yi Qing-ning was asking. She nodded gently and said to Yi Qing-ning, I saw it. He has become more and more outstanding. If Qinchuan's performance in the 6th Great Academy's ranking competition had only amazed Wang Wenxue, then Qinchuan's performance in the Xiao Yao secret territory had greatly shocked Wang Wenxue. Qinchuan's performance could no longer be described as outstanding. If an appropriate adjective had to be found, it would probably be invincible. While these people were still comparing with each other, Qinchuan had already become the strongest person above everyone else. This was something that Wang Wenxue did not expect. Hearing Wang Wenxue's praise for Qinchuan, Yi Qing-ning smiled slightly and said to Wang Wenxue, in fact, when I first learned of Qinchuan's existence, for some reason, I had some prejudice against him. But after several contacts, I found that this person is different from what I imagined. He is a very charming person with his own unique views. In the past, I have come into contact with many young talents, but no one can give me a different feeling than Qinchuan. Wang Wenxue quietly listened to Yi Qing-ning talk about her feelings about Qinchuan. To be honest, she could not empathize with what Yi Qing-ning said, because the Qinchuan she came into contact with the most was the one who tenaciously survived from the slums. He was the Qinchuan in high school who never complained about being tired or suffering. After being admitted to university, Qinchuan's name and figure faded from her world. When they met again, Qinchuan had become the shining MVP. You're right. Wang Wenxue looked at Yi Qing-ning. The current him is indeed a very charming and outstanding person. Yi Qing-ning looked at Wang Wenxue and asked seriously, Have you ever regretted it? Hearing this question, the smile on Wang Wenxue's face gradually disappeared. She said softly, In fact, I have asked myself this question countless times. When I see Qinchuan so dazzling and outstanding, do I regret being blind and missing such a bright pearl? Hearing Wang Wenxue's words, Yi Qing-ning could not help but sigh. If those things had not happened, Wang Wenxue would have been the one who was most likely to be together with Qinchuan. No one was more qualified than Wang Wenxue. Unfortunately, it was all just if. Later, I thought it through. In fact, there is nothing to regret. Things have already happened. Time will not go back. Everything is destined. Wang Wenxue sighed faintly. He's doing very well now, and so am I. Actually, there's no need for me to dwell on the past, and he probably won't take it to heart either. We should all look forward and think about the future. After saying this, Wang Wenxue looked at Yi Qing-ning and asked, Do you like him? Facing Yi Qing-ning's question, Wang Wenxue nodded calmly. Until now, Qinchuan is the only boy who has moved my heart. If there is a suitable opportunity, perhaps I will confess. What a surprise. You are the star dragon goddess. Wang Wenxue looked at Yi Qing-ning with a complicated expression. With your looks, you are worthy of anyone. But Qinchuan is an exception. Yi Qing-ning smiled. He is more special than the star dragon goddess. Chapter 467. Every time Qinchuan triggered lightning punishment, the time needed to refine the power of lightning punishment would become longer. Last time Qinchuan hadn't completely refined the power of lightning punishment within his body before triggering the next lightning punishment. But this time was different. In order to deal with the restriction of carefree residence, Qin Chuan would completely refine the power of lightning punishment within his body before triggering the next lightning punishment. At this time, more than half a day had already passed since Qin Chuan triggered the 8th lightning punishment. During this time, the entire carefree palace appeared extremely quiet. Everyone was resting, waiting for the moment when Qin Chuan was fully prepared. Qin Chuan slowly opened his eyes, then spat out a mouthful of turbid air. At this time, he had already completely refined the power of lightning punishment produced by the 8th lightning punishment. The power within his body was so abundant that it felt as if it was about to overflow. His condition was simply exploding. Everyone who had been silently paying attention to Qin Chuan all along walked over when Qin Chuan woke up. Lu Zi squatted beside Qin Chuan, then asked with concern, "How do you feel?" "I'm very good." Qin Chuan faintly smiled, then looking towards other people, he said, "I think I can give it a try." Hearing Qin Chuan, Zhou Lin slightly frowned and said, "Isn't this just the 8th lightning punishment? The restriction outside carefree residence should have the same might as the 9th lightning punishment, so there's no need to trigger it again. So as to avoid undue delay, it's better to settle this matter as soon as possible." Hearing Qin Chuan, everyone was still somewhat worried. After all, most of them hadn't seen the might of the 9th lightning punishment. Merely the previous 8th lightning punishment was already astonishing enough. If they didn't see Qin Chuan safe and sound under the 9th lightning punishment with their own eyes, then they really wouldn't be able to feel at ease. Just when everyone was talking, Yarao also walked over. She looked at Qin Chuan with subtle expression, then said with a chuckle, "You actually hid very deeply. I really didn't expect you actually have a way to enter carefree residence. Perhaps you can obtain the true inheritance of Carefree Master." Carefree Master as an almighty cultivator from millions of years ago, if his inheritance appeared, then it would certainly shock the world. Qin Chuan faintly smiled and said, "Just giving it a try. I also don't know whether I can succeed or not. In any case, you are the first person who might succeed." Yarao used joking tone and said, "Now that you have obtained benefits, don't tell me you want to kick us demon race away." Having heard these words, Qin Chuan deeply looked at Yarao and said, "Don't worry, I am never the person to burn the bridge after crossing the river." "Then, I am relieved." Yarao very casually handed over the feather fan in her hand to Qin Chuan. "Carefree residence seems safe, but it doesn't necessarily have no hidden dangers. I will lend you Tianyi Fan, it can save your life at the critical moment." Seeing Tianyi Fan handed over by Yarao, Qin Chuan was slightly startled, then asked, "This thing is said to be the most valuable treasure of your demon race. You are just lending it to me like this. Don't tell me you are not afraid I will embezzle it?" Yarao lightly raised her eyebrows. "What, don't tell me you intend to embezzle it?" Qin Chuan smiled, but didn't speak, merely replied, "Thank you." Finished speaking, Qin Chuan turned around and walked towards Carefree residence. As for other people, they naturally followed closely behind him. After seeing the action of Qin Chuan's group, the nearby people somewhat excitedly called out to their friends, and together they walked towards Carefree residence. They intended to see with their own eyes how Qin Chuan was going to enter Carefree residence. Once again standing outside the barrier of Carefree residence, Qin Chuan's mood was even more nervous and perturbed than before. This time's probing could be said to be very dangerous. If he succeeded, then naturally everyone would be happy, but if he failed, then perhaps what awaited him was only death. At this time, several people following beside Qin Chuan also felt the uneasiness in Qin Chuan's heart. Lu Zi even directly reached out her hand and grabbed Qin Chuan's arm, then said in a low voice, "Perhaps we still have other methods, we don't necessarily have to take risks." Having heard what was said, Qin Chuan lowered his head and looked towards Lu Zi, then said in a low voice, "But this is currently the fastest and also the best method. Carefree residence could be said to be everyone's last hope. If there was no way to restrain the insect plague in Carefree residence, Then they could only wait here for the moment when carefree secret territory closed. As for Zerg's matter, they could only think of a way later. At this time, the people who had heard the news had already surrounded carefree residents. Everyone was looking forward to Qin Chuan, wanting to see what Qin Chuan was going to do. Under everyone's gaze, Qin Chuan slowly stepped forward and stood less than 1 meter away from the barrier. Buzz. When Qin Chuan approached the barrier, suddenly a buzzing sound rang out, and then the barrier began to flicker. Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but cry out in alarm. Thousands of years had passed, and they had never heard that the barrier of carefree residents would flicker. Yao Rao faintly looked at Qin Chuan's figure with some expectation. Perhaps today Qin Chuan would really bring them some surprises. Although this is the first time I entered Carefree Palace, I once heard from my father that the barrier of Carefree Palace will never disappear, and there won't be any changes. Everyone who tried to enter Carefree Residence died without exception. Long Xiao somewhat excitedly said to Bai Yu, who was beside him, Qin Chuan has created history, he is the son of miracles. Bai Yu nodded in agreement. Indeed, Qin Chuan had created too many miracles, too much history. Boss, please don't let anything happen to you. Chen Chongqing looked at Qin Chuan with excitement and apprehension. He really didn't want anything to happen to Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan took a step forward, and Lu Zi also nervously took a step forward. She gently raised her hand, as if she wanted to reach out and grab Qin Chuan. She didn't want to see Qin Chuan take any risk. That kind of nervous and uneasy feeling was really too torturous. Zhou Lin, who had the most confidence in Qin Chuan, also couldn't help but feel nervous at this time. Her eyes were filled with worry for Qin Chuan. Phew! Qin Chuan let out a long breath, and then took another step forward. This time, his body completely penetrated the barrier and entered Carefree Residence. Rumble! Just as Qin Chuan's body was about to enter Carefree Residence, a violent roar of thunder suddenly resounded in the sky above Carefree Palace. In the next moment, a dazzling flash of lightning lit up in Carefree Residence, and the entire world was dyed blue. Facing this dazzling light, everyone subconsciously closed their eyes. The dazzling light flashed for dozens of minutes before slowly dissipating. At the moment when the lightning dissipated, everyone couldn't wait to open their eyes and look at Carefree Residence. They saw a charred figure where Qin Chuan was originally standing. It was impossible to see the figure's shape at all, and they couldn't even sense his aura, whether he was alive or dead. Without a doubt, this charred figure was Qin Chuan. Chapter 468. Is he dead? Among the crowd, don't know who said this sentence, but it broke the deathly silence of the scene. Everyone blankly looked at that charred figure lying on the ground of Carefree Residence. No one knew whether Qin Chuan was dead or alive. When I saw Qin Chuan for the first time, he was also like this, so he should still be alive. Just when everyone was curious, nervous and apprehensive, Zhou Lin suddenly opened her mouth and explained for everyone. Hearing Zhou Lin, Lu Zi hastily asked, "What was the situation at that time?" At that time Qin Chuan triggered the 9th layer of lightning punishment, and was struck into this state. At that time, I carefully examined him, but didn't detect any life aura from his body. Originally I thought he was dead, but later he appeared before me alive, and told me that he was not dead at that time, but his aura was already weakened to the extreme, and he was unable to move. After he finished refining the lightning punishment power that poured into his body, he would be able to recover. Hearing Zhou Lin's detailed explanation, Lu Zi relaxed, and at the same time asked, "How long did it take for him to recover?" He didn't say the specifics, but I estimate roughly 15 hours. Zhou Lin pondered for a moment, then said, "It shouldn't be more than a day." Lu Zi turned her head and looked towards Bai Yu, then asked, "Can you perceive it?" "No." Bai Yu shook her head. "There is a restriction barrier, so I can't perceive it." Just when everyone was uneasy because they weren't sure whether Qin Chuan was dead or alive, Yaorao indifferently said, "Don't worry, he is still alive." Hearing Yaorao's words, everyone was extremely surprised, and Lu Zi couldn't help but ask, "How do you know?" "I don't need to explain this to you, but I can be sure that Qin Chuan is still alive." Yaorao shot a glance at Lu Zi, then said, "In short, now we just have to patiently wait for Qin Chuan to wake up." Seeing Yaorao solemnly vowed, Lu Zi also didn't ask any more, but once again looked towards Qin Chuan's charred figure inside the restriction. 1 day passed, 2 days passed, but that charred figure lying inside the restriction already didn't have any movement, and no one was able to see any change. Even the most patient people at this time couldn't help but become impatient. Didn't they say at most 1 day's time? Why 2 days already passed? Qin Chuan still didn't have any movement? When other people were worried and restless, Yaorao, however, was extremely calm. She continued to cultivate, and eat. She didn't seem to panic at all. "Yaorao, are you sure that Qin Chuan is all right?" Lu Zi already couldn't remember how many times she had asked Yaorao like this. She was really worried that Qin Chuan would have an accident. This kind of powerless feeling of watching Qin Chuan fall down in front of her without being able to do anything really made her collapse. Having heard her question, Yaorao shot a glance at Lu Zi, then said, "I already don't feel like answering you. Our demon clan's ancestral treasure Tianifan was brought inside the restriction by Qin Chuan. If Qin Chuan dies, then Tianifan is equal to losing it. Then how can I still be so calm?" Yaorao's words sounded very reasonable, but Lu Zi was still unable to calm down. Seeing Lu Zi's haggard complexion, Long Xiao softly comforted, "Believe in Qin Chuan, nothing will happen to him. I just, kacha. At this time, a burst of crisp kacha shattering sound resounded in the ears of everyone. Hearing this sound, everyone subconsciously looked towards that burnt black figure lying on the ground inside the restriction of carefree residence. Unknowingly, cracks had actually appeared on that burnt black figure, and these cracks were still unceasingly expanding. Seeing this scene, everyone's face exposed a pleasantly surprised expression. Kacha. After the black outer shell completely shattered, white and delicate skin was exposed. Very soon, a bald figure from head to toe walked out from this black outer shell. This figure was precisely Qin Chuan, who had been silent for 2 days, making everyone incomparably worried. Even though everyone knew that Qin Chuan was still alive, but when they really saw Qin Chuan standing up, everyone still couldn't help but become excited. Looking at that familiar figure, Lu Zi couldn't help but shout, "Qin Chuan!" Hearing Lu Zi's shout, Qin Chuan, who had just recovered, subconsciously turned around to look outside, but then he again turned back and somewhat awkwardly said, "Don't look first, let me put on some clothes first." Hearing Qin Chuan's response, everyone became excited, and only then did they realize that at this time, Qin Chuan didn't have any clothes on his body. He was completely naked. Looking at Qin Chuan's white and tender buttocks, the faces of all women couldn't help but blush, and subconsciously turned their head away. Qin Chuan squatted down and found the storage ring and bronze ring from the outer shell, and put them back on his hand, then took out a set of sportswear from the storage ring and put it on his body, then lightly coughed and said to everyone, "I'm done." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, everyone became excited again. After thousands of years, someone finally succeeded in entering the carefree residence alive. "Do you feel any discomfort?" Zhou Lin asked with concern. "Can you move freely?" Hearing this, Qin Chuan moved his muscles and slightly smiled. "I feel that my current condition is very good, and I seem to have broken through to the late stage of foundation establishment." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, everyone was somewhat astonished. They could understand that he was in a good condition, but breaking through to the late stage of foundation establishment was too terrifying. After all, almost 3 months ago, Qin Chuan was only at the early stage of foundation establishment. Just as everyone was shocked, Qin Chuan walked step by step toward the carefree residence. Under the nervous and expectant gazes of everyone, Qin Chuan didn't touch the 3 brocade boxes on the stone table, but stepped into the thatched hut. Even though thousands of years had passed, the thatched hut was still spotless. Stepping on the solid ground, Qin Chuan looked around and quickly locked onto an offering table. On the table, fruits and desserts were neatly arranged. In addition, there was a simple bronze incense burner. What surprised Qin Chuan was that there were 3 incense sticks in the middle of the incense burner. They were emitting a faint fragrance. It's been thousands of years, and the incense hasn't been extinguished. While he was surprised, Qin Chuan raised his head and looked at the portrait that was hung on the wall. It was the figure of a young man wearing white and holding a long sword. Just as Qin Chuan wanted to take a closer look at the person's appearance, the figure in the portrait mysteriously disappeared. At the same time, the Rune sword that had been silent in Qin Chuan's mind trembled violently. Chapter 469. This is, Qin Chuan was surprised. The runic sword had not moved for a long time, but today, it trembled violently in front of a portrait. Could it be that the runic sword knew the person in the portrait? Just as Qin Chuan was thinking about this, the long sword in the hand of the white-robed figure in the portrait suddenly became illusory. The next moment, it turned into a wisp of green smoke and floated out. Qin Chuan looked at the green smoke floating in the air. Before he could react, the green smoke suddenly came close to him and disappeared. The runic sword that had been floating in his mind suddenly became hazy. Looking at the green smoke that shrouded the runic sword, Qin Chuan's mind was full of question marks. He did not understand why such a miraculous thing would happen. The sword in the portrait has disappeared, and the portrait has no face. Qin Chuan looked at the portrait in front of him with a slightly subtle gaze. After hesitating for a moment, he decided to bow 3 times to the portrait to show his respect. No matter who the person in the portrait was, he was still a senior in the cultivation world. It was normal to bow to a senior. After bowing, Qin Chuan carefully looked at the thatched cottage. After making sure that there was nothing else worth paying attention to, he turned around and walked outside. Just as Qin Chuan turned around, the white-robed figure in the portrait raised his hand and made a goodbye gesture, as if he was saying goodbye to an old friend. Outside the carefree residence, everyone saw Qin Chuan's figure walk into the thatched cottage and did not come out. They were worried and curious. This thatched cottage should be where the carefree master lived in the past. There might be some treasures inside. Perhaps Qin Chuan did not come out for a long time to collect the treasures. Thinking of this, everyone could not help but scratch their ears and cheek. They were eager to know what treasures were inside. Just as everyone was curious, Qin Chuan slowly walked out of the thatched cottage. When everyone saw that he was empty-handed, they subconsciously looked at the storage ring on his right hand. He knew what these people were thinking, but he did not explain anything. Instead, he walked step by step toward the herb garden. When everyone saw that Qin Chuan walked toward the herb garden and did not take the 3 brocade boxes on the stone table, they were all anxious. So many people were waiting to see what treasures were in the brocade boxes. Big brother, can't you do something serious first? However, they did not know that in Qin Chuan's mind, collecting herbs in the herb garden was the most serious thing. After all, he once said that he would give the treasures to the right people. This treasure included the things in the brocade boxes, but it did not include the precious spiritual herbs in the herb garden. So, collecting the spiritual herbs first was the most beneficial thing for him. When Duan Yusin saw Qin Chuan casually pick a 10,000-year-old 9-leaf grass and put it into the storage ring, she could not help but grin and say, "This kid's collecting technique is too rough. That is a 10,000-year-old 9-leaf grass. Can't he be more careful?" When everyone heard Duan Yusin's words, they could not help but nod. Qin Chuan's collecting technique was indeed a bit rough. He was really not worried about damaging the spiritual herbs at all. It should be known that even if this 10,000-year-old spiritual herb was damaged, it would be very distressing. The herb garden was not big. There were only a dozen spiritual herbs planted in it. Some of them were recognized, while others were unknown. However, just by looking at their appearance, one could tell that they were not ordinary. But for these spiritual herbs, everyone could only drool. After a long time, everyone finally waited until Qin Chuan picked the last spiritual herb. They saw Qin Chuan glance around the herb garden as if he was not satisfied. After making sure that he did not miss anything, he regretfully lifted his feet and walked toward the stone table in front of the thatched cottage. When everyone saw Qin Chuan approaching the stone table, they all subconsciously held their breath. Their eyes were nervously and expectantly looking at the 3 brocade boxes on the stone table. Qin Chuan walked to the stone table and stood in front of it. He said to everyone, "I've said before that the treasures will be distributed to the most suitable person. I will not keep them for myself." Originally, when everyone saw that Qin Chuan had collected all the spiritual herbs in the herb garden, they were still worried that Qin Chuan would change his mind at the last minute and take the treasures in the 3 brocade boxes for himself. Now that they heard Qin Chuan reiterate the previous agreement, many of them were relieved and began to look forward to the treasures in the brocade boxes being fated to be with them. Under everyone's anticipation, Qin Chuan reached out and picked up the first brocade box. He opened the lock on the brocade box and lifted the lid. A palm-sized purple eyeball appeared in front of everyone's eyes, emitting a charming light. This thing, before Qin Chuan could finish his words, the purple eyeball flashed and suddenly flew out of the restrictive barrier. It shot straight toward Lu Zi, who was in the crowd. Whoosh! Before anyone could react, the purple eyeball directly merged into Lu Zi's glabella and disappeared. Everyone's expressions were extremely interesting as they stared at Lu Zi, who had her eyes closed and did not move at all. None of them had expected such a thing to happen. Qin Chuan was extremely surprised as well. Of course, he had hoped to distribute the treasures to those close to him. However, this treasure had suddenly flown toward Lu Zi. This was completely out of his expectations. Zhou Lin looked at Lu Zi and said hesitantly, "She should be fine. Based on her current behavior, she should be merging with the treasure." Hearing Zhou Lin's words, Qin Chuan heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, he could not help but feel envious. "I didn't even get to see what the treasure looked like. It had actually flown away just like that." It could be said that Qin Chuan's words were what everyone was thinking. Everyone was still waiting to analyze the attribute and origin of this treasure to choose a suitable owner for this treasure. However, before they could figure out anything, this treasure had already flown away to find its owner. Yarao looked at Lu Zi with subtle expression and said to everyone, "If I didn't guess incorrectly, this should be a spirit treasure." Hearing Yarao's words, everyone was stunned for a moment. However, when they thought about what a spirit treasure was, they couldn't help but exclaim, "If that purple eyeball was really a spirit treasure, then Lu Zi had truly profited a lot." Treasures with spirit were called spirit treasures. Spirit treasures were above the best grade magic treasures and were comparable to half-step Dao tools. If carefully nurtured, there was a great chance that it could evolve into a Dao tool. This level of treasure was extremely precious even in the 4 great clans. Only Yuanying stage old ancestor could possess one, and Lu Zi was only at the initial stage of foundation establishment, but she had already possessed a spirit treasure which only Yuanying stage old ancestor could possess. How could people not be envious of this kind of luck? Involuntarily, everyone looked at the remaining 2 brocade boxes, and their face was filled with expectation. Chapter 470. Under the extremely expectant gaze of everyone, Qin Chuan picked up the second brocade box, opened the lock, and opened the lid. This time, everyone could clearly see that inside the brocade box, there was an exquisite scarlet feather. This feather had some sparks jumping on it, looking extremely gorgeous and enchanting. Whoosh! Just like that purple eyeball, this scarlet feather also instantly flew out after opening the brocade box, broke through the restriction, and directly rushed towards Yaorao in the crowd, and fell into the hand of Yaorao. Seeing this scene, although everyone was already prepared in their heart, but still couldn't help but somewhat envied. Another spirit treasure, and again it chose its own master, and this time it chose its master as demon race. Looking at that scarlet feather in her hand, Yaorao seemed to have thought of something, and her charming face couldn't help but reveal a happy smile. She raised her eyes and looked towards Qinchuan, and happily said, "Qinchuan, this time I owe you a favor." "That's not necessary." Qinchuan chuckled. "Spirit treasure chose its own master, it has nothing to do with me, I only opened the brocade box, nothing more." When he opened the brocade box and saw that the treasure inside was a scarlet red feather, Qinchuan's mind involuntarily flashed with an enchanting figure. The choice of the spiritual treasure was indeed as expected. It was completely within his expectations. "No matter what, I have to thank you, if not for you, no one else would have been able to open this brocade box." Obviously, Yaorao, who had obtained the favor of spirit treasure, was very happy, and now she must owe Qinchuan a favor. Qinchuan smiled, and without saying anything, he turned around and picked up the third brocade box. Seeing the action of Qinchuan, everyone subconsciously held their breath. This was already the last brocade box. If they missed this opportunity, then next time they would have to wait for God knows when they would be able to encounter such a good thing again. Patter. Qinchuan didn't procrastinate, and straightforwardly opened the third brocade box. This last brocade box contained a jelly-like transparent golden-colored thing. When everyone clearly saw the appearance of this thing had already soared up, and went straight towards Zhou Lin in the crowd. Sure enough, it was another spirit treasure, and this spirit treasure chose its own master. The golden-colored jelly smashed on Zhou Lin's face, and instantly penetrated through the pores on Zhou Lin's face, and disappeared into Zhou Lin's brain. When Qinchuan saw that the third spirit treasure had chosen Zhou Lin as its owner, he felt happy for Zhou Lin. However, he also felt that it was a pity. It was a pity that none of the three spirit treasures were suitable for him. Although the spirit herbs were priceless, a dozen spirit herbs added together might not be able to match the value of a single spirit treasure. If he were to talk about his greatest gain, it would be the mysterious green smoke that lingered around the runic sword. At this point, there were no more treasures inside spirit treasure. Just when Qinchuan wanted to say something, the restriction on all four sides of spirit treasure suddenly flickered, and then unexpectedly disappeared. Seeing this scene, the complexion of Yaorao, who was extremely excited just a moment ago, suddenly changed, and said in deep voice, "Not only the restriction of spirit treasure disappeared, the restriction of the entire spirit treasure palace also disappeared." While speaking, Yaorao jumped up from the ground, and sure enough, her action didn't trigger the lightning punishment restriction. If it was in normal times, then the disappearance of the restriction of Spirit Treasure Palace might be a good thing for everyone, but right now there was insect plague everywhere outside, so the disappearance of the restriction of Spirit Treasure Palace was absolutely a huge disaster for them. How could the restriction of Spirit Treasure Palace disappear just like that? Could it be that those 3 brocade boxes can't be moved? Is it too late to go back now? Without the protection of restriction, how can we resist the insect plague? When everyone was at a loss and didn't know what to do, a burst of buzzing sound came from all directions, and visible with naked eyes, countless flying insects swarmed over from all directions. Seeing the swarm of insects rushing over, everyone's face was filled with fear. Just as everyone thought that the swarm of insects would drown them, the insects flying at the front suddenly stopped, turned around, and flew towards their companions behind them, and began to fight with their companions in a frenzy. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Everyone looked at the insects that were suddenly fighting with each other, and the expression of alarm froze on their face, and their eyes were filled with doubt. What did they just see? These insects didn't attack them, but unexpectedly they were killing each other. Everyone be careful, there will be some fish that slip through the net. Just when everyone was shocked and puzzled, a cold voice suddenly rang in everyone's ears. Everyone subconsciously turned their heads to look at the person who spoke, and saw Zhou Lin in the middle of the crowd, holding a strange seal with both her hands. A pair of bright and beautiful eyes flashed with a seductive purple light, and on top of Lu Zi's head, the purple eyeball that had merged with Lu Zi's body was slowly rotating, looking exceptionally mystical. Seeing this scene, everyone quickly reacted. The reason why these insects were killing each other wasn't because they had suddenly gone crazy, but because Lu Zi was deliberately controlling them. Qin Chuan quickly walked to Lu Zi's side and asked with concern, "What's going on?" Zhou Lin answered concisely, "All the insects that I see will be confused by me, and at my mercy. I'm controlling the insects that are closest to us to attack the insects that are coming from behind." Hearing Zhou Lin's explanation, everyone's face couldn't help but reveal a touch of surprise. Who would have thought that after the restriction disappeared, Lu Zi would unexpectedly become the new restriction? Although Zhou Lin was unable to block all the insects, and there were still some insects that slipped through the net and rushed in to attack everyone, but they were already unable to cause any disturbance to everyone, and were killed on the ground in 2 or 3 hits. Everyone's nervous mood also gradually calmed down, at least from the current situation, they were temporarily safe. Qin Chuan looked at Lu Zi and asked with concern, "How long can you persist? Do you need any help?" "I estimate that I can only persist for 3 hours, we must think of a way as soon as possible." Lu Zi somewhat apologetically looked at Qin Chuan. "I'm sorry, I have just obtained Purple Star Divine Pupils, so I still don't have any way to fully display the power of Purple Star Divine Pupils." "Why are you saying sorry? If there was no you, I'm afraid we would have already been bitten to death." Qin Chuan looked at calm face of Yaorao and asked, "What method do you have?" Yaorao shot a glance at Qin Chuan, then stretched out her hand. "First return Tianyi Fan to me, then I will naturally deal with this insect plague." Having heard what was said, Qin Chuan was somewhat speechless, then he took out Tianyi Fan from his storage ring and handed it over to Yaorao. "Do you really think I want to covet your Tianyi Fan?" Yaorao snorted, but didn't respond to Qin Chuan. She inserted that scarlet feather that she had obtained before into Tianyi Fan, then the originally snow-white Tianyi Fan unexpectedly changed into scarlet color. Chapter 471. Not only the color of Tianyi Fan had changed, even the aura it was emitting had become blazing, making people feel as if they were directly facing the eruption of volcano magma. "Heavenly Fire Prairie!" Yaorao shouted, then vigorously waved the Tianyi Fan in her hand. Suddenly a huge scarlet-colored flame appeared in the sky, then suddenly exploded, changing into a rain of fire, covering the sky and covering the sun, changing the entire world into scarlet color. Scarlet-colored flame tumbled in the sky, sweeping through and wreaking havoc. Everywhere it passed, all the flying insects were turned into flying ash, and they didn't even have the chance to struggle. Everyone raised their head and looked at that surging flame in the sky, and all of them were shocked speechless. This kind of terrifying imposing manner and this kind of range attack, perhaps even Gold Core Realm experts would find it hard to accomplish, but all of this was accomplished in one move by Yaorao. Blazing flame crazily swallowed the area covered by insect plague, but after a moment, other than the flame, there was not even a trace of insect in the sky. Looking as far as the eye could see, there was only flame. Qin Chuan looked at the flame in the sky with astonishment, then asked Yaorao, "How long will this flame burn?" "I also don't know." Yaorao faintly smiled. "When insect plague is completely burned, this flame will naturally stop." Having heard what was said, Qin Chuan looked at Yaorao in astonishment. "Is it really so terrifying?" One must know, this insect plague was so huge that it almost covered the area from Purple Golden Palace to Seven-Colored Glazed Mansion, and then to Xiao Yao Palace, covering no less than several 100,000 square kilometers. If this flame could completely burn insect plague, then this was really too terrifying. Yao Rao confidently smiled, and replied, "If it is only Tianyi Fan, then it is naturally impossible, but with the support of Phoenix Feather, it is not necessarily impossible." Hearing Yao Rao, Qinchuan's face couldn't help but reveal a hint of surprise. That feather is actually the legendary Phoenix Feather? When Phoenix was undergoing nirvana, it would condense all of its power into the feather on its tail. If it was reborn, then it would be able to absorb the power of the feather again, and its realm would reach a higher level. If its nirvana failed, then the feather would change into Phoenix Feather, becoming the only thing left behind by Phoenix in this world. And as a natural spirit treasure, the original owner of Phoenix Feather was at least Demon King realm existence. In other words, Yao Rao was borrowing the power of Demon King to burn the insect disaster. This phoenix plume can only be condensed from a greater demon phoenix. To me, it's even more precious than a Tao artifact. Looking at Tian Fan in her hand, Yao Rao said to Qinchuan, "At that time, if you had used Phoenix Feather as the exchange condition to trade for Tian Fan, then perhaps I would have also agreed without any hesitation. Although the Tianyi Fan was good, it was only a half-step Tao item. How could it compare to the value of the Phoenix Plume? According to what you're saying, isn't it a huge loss for me?" Qinchuan chuckled, then looking towards the flame in the sky, he somewhat curiously asked Yao Rao, "Could it be that you are also a phoenix?" Since he had known Yao Rao until now, Qinchuan had never been able to see what the true form of Yao Rao was, and Yao Rao had also never revealed her true form, but judging from the magic weapon used by Yao Rao, she should also be a bird, perhaps she might be a phoenix. Having heard what was said, Yao Rao shot a somewhat displeased glance at Qinchuan and said, "Can you not use only to describe me? Moreover, I am still not a phoenix now." "Still not a phoenix now, doesn't this mean that after obtaining the phoenix feather, you will soon become a phoenix?" Qinchuan lightly raised his eyebrows. "Could it be that you are now a chicken?" Yao Rao slightly narrowed her eyes and asked, "Do you think you are very humorous?" "I am joking, just livening up the atmosphere, don't be angry. If you dare to talk nonsense again, I will burn you together with the insect." Just when Qinchuan and Yao Rao were chatting, the rain of fire had already gradually dissipated, and from the fiery red color, the sky once again changed into a clear blue sky. There were no clouds in the sky, and there were also no insects. Looking at that clear sky, everyone couldn't help but have tears in their eyes. It had already been too long since they had seen such a clear sky. Since the appearance of insect plague, every time they raised their head, they would always see numerous insects. That kind of feeling was truly too depressing. Long live Princess Rao! Among the crowd, "Don't know which one of the monster race," shouted loudly. Shortly after, numerous monster race began to shout one after another. The cheers of "Long live Princess Rao" resounded throughout Xiao Yao Palace. Qinchuan looked at numerous excited monster race, then looking at Lu Zi who was beside him, he faintly smiled and said, "You are also the best." Hearing Qinchuan's words, the face of Lu Zi also revealed a happy smile, and said in a low voice, "I feel that I am finally no longer a trash who can't do anything." Far away, on top of a hill, Ban was looking at the flames engulfing the sky in horror. Looking at the flying insects that were fleeing in panic, he involuntarily cried out, "What the hell is going on? How could this kind of situation occur?" Sienna also looked in the direction of the sky in shock. Just a moment ago, he saw with his own eyes that a rain of fire suddenly appeared in the sky, burning the insect plague that they had painstakingly developed to nothing. Just as Sienna and Ban were in shock, Qin Haoshuan pursed his lips and said in a low voice, "This flame seems to have come from Xiao Yao Palace. Perhaps it was caused by Qin Chuan. But Sienna slapped Qin Haoshuan's face hard. The huge force directly caused Qin Haoshuan to fall to the ground, and his cheeks quickly became red and swollen. Bullsh *T. Sienna stared at Qin Haoshuan viciously and cursed. Do you think I am brainless? If Qin Chuan really has the ability to release such terrifying flames, we would have been burned to death long ago. Qin Haoshuan raised his head and looked at Sienna. His eyes were exceptionally calm as he said indifferently, "It's up to you to believe it or not." Sienna snorted coldly and didn't continue to attack Qin Haoshuan. Instead, he looked in the direction of Xiao Yao Palace with a gloomy gaze and said to Ban, "Let's go. Let's go to the depths of Xiao Yao's secret realm and look for the altar." In Sienna's original plan, he wanted to kill Qin Chuan and his group before looking for the altar. However, now that the insect plague had been completely burned, they had lost their most reliable method. They basically had no chance of winning against Qin Chuan. Therefore, he could only temporarily put his revenge plan on hold and look for the altar first. Ban agreed with Sienna's suggestion. The sacred beetles that they had brought with them had all been killed, so they couldn't create a new insect plague. At this moment, they had no chance of winning against Qin Chuan. It was better for them to temporarily avoid Qin Chuan and look for the altar in the depths of the secret realm. As long as we find the altar and rebuild the wormhole, our army will be able to descend. At that time, these people will all die. Sienna looked in the direction of Xiao Yao Palace with a crazy gaze. He would definitely come back for revenge. Chapter 472. Insect Plague was burned clean by Yaorao's fire, ruthlessly wiping out her existence, making both human and demon race deeply grateful to her, regarding her as their savior. Amidst the praises and grateful voices, Yaorao slowly walked to the side of Qin Chuan, then calmly looking at Qin Chuan, she asked, "Now that insect plague is gone, what are you going to do next? Are you going to look for those two Zerg fighters?" Having heard what she said, Qin Chuan shook his head and said, "We have eliminated insect plague, so as long as those two Zerg fighters are not idiots, they will not wait for us to find them. They will either take the initiative to attack or flee far away. I think the possibility of the latter is higher." "I think what you said is somewhat reasonable. Those two Zerg fighters are not very strong, and now that they have lost their biggest reliance, insect plague, they shouldn't have the guts to confront us head-on." Yaorao slightly smiled, then suddenly sat down beside Qin Chuan and asked, "How about I discuss a matter with you?" Qin Chuan shot a glance at Yaorao and said, "I didn't take anything from Thatched Cottage, moreover, don't have any idea about my elixirs." Yaorao didn't expect that before she even opened her mouth. Qin Chuan had already guessed her intention. She faintly smiled towards Qin Chuan and said, "Those elixirs you picked, you shouldn't know many of them, right? I can tell you their names and effects one by one, but you have to give me an elixir that absolutely has no use to you, and you can set any conditions. How about it?" Having heard what was said, Qin Chuan suspiciously looked at Yaorao and asked, "You know those elixirs? Moreover, how do you know that elixir has no use to me? Who knows whether you are trying to trick me or not?" Yaorao lightly raised her eyebrows and asked in reply, "We have fought side by side until now, don't tell me that we don't even have this basic trust?" Qin Chuan very sincerely shook his head and said, "No." Yaorao resisted the urge to burn Qin Chuan to death, then gnashing her teeth, she said, "Among those elixirs you picked, there is a stalk called transformation grass. Transformation grass can allow demon race to trace back to their bloodline source and sublimate their life level, but it has no effect on you human race. Don't tell me you want to revert back to your ancestor and become a gorilla?" Having heard what was said, Qin Chuan slightly looked at Yaorao with subtle expression and asked, "If you get this transformation grass, coupled with that phoenix feather, then wouldn't you have great certainty to sublimate your life level to phoenix?" Yarao deeply looked at Qinchuan, then solemnly nodded her head and said, "You are right. If I only have Phoenix feather, then my success to you, I only have a very small chance. But if I also add 10,000 years transformation grass, then my success rate more than 50%. Then if I don't give it to you, wouldn't you hate me to death?" Qinchuan chuckled. "I can give you transformation grass, but as for the condition, give me the key." Having heard what was said, Yarao's complexion slightly changed, then pretending to be puzzled, she asked, "What key? Are you pretending to be confused?" Qinchuan chuckled. "You should know, at that time, I was the one who got out earlier than you, and I was the one who saved Ma Jiawen. Such a big key was floating in the sky, unless I was blind, otherwise how could I not see it?" Hearing Qinchuan, Yarao somewhat had a headache and asked, "What if I don't give it to you?" She really didn't expect that Qinchuan actually already knew that the key was in her hands. If she had known earlier, then she wouldn't have boasted to let Qinchuan casually state the condition. "Up to you." Qinchuan lightly shrugged his shoulder. "I don't care." Seeing Qinchuan's indifferent appearance, Yarao was extremely angry, but she was helpless against Qinchuan. After all, it was she who had a request from Qinchuan, not Qinchuan who was asking her. "Here you go." Yarao hatefully threw that white jade key into the bosom of Qinchuan, then stretched out her hand. "Give me transformation grass." Qinchuan received the key with a smile, then took out a white-colored elixir from his storage ring and handed it over to Yarao. "Here, this is the transformation grass you want." Seeing Qinchuan took out the transformation grass, Yarao immediately reached out her hand and snatched it, then conveniently put it away. But shortly after, she seemed to have thought of something, then somewhat suspiciously looking at Qinchuan, she asked, "Do you know transformation grass?" Qinchuan frankly nodded his head, then calmly said, "Actually, as early as when I asked you what is your true form, I had already guessed that you would ask me for transformation grass. Originally, seeing that we had fought side by side for so long, I had intended to give it to you for free, but who would have thought that you would actually state the condition of transaction, and even ask me for it? So if I were to be polite with you, then wouldn't that be not giving you face?" Hearing Qinchuan's explanation, Yarao gnashed her teeth in anger, then hatefully said, "If you really wanted to give it to me, then why did you wait for me to take the initiative to ask? Why are you still pretending that you don't know anything?" This. Qinchuan suddenly took out a pink flower with 9 petals, then asked, "Do you know this elixir?" After Qinchuan escaped from the pursuit of Yarao, he found Zhou Lin who was quietly cultivating in a corner. After obtaining the favor of that jelly-like spirit treasure, Zhou Lin had never stopped her cultivation. It seems her fusion with this spirit treasure was not as smooth as Lu Zi and Yarao. Just as Qinchuan approached, Zhou Lin sensed and opened her eyes, then looking towards Qinchuan, she faintly smiled and asked, "Have you finished dealing with the matter?" Qinchuan nodded his head and said, "There is no insect plague, most of the people have already left, and there are not many people left, so there is nothing to deal with." While speaking, Qinchuan walked to the side of Zhou Lin and sat down, then asked Zhou Lin, "Senior sister, it seems your fusion with spirit treasure is not smooth?" Hearing this, Zhou Lin somewhat hesitated and said, "It's not that it is not smooth, but I don't feel any change." After Lu Zi obtained Purple Star Divine Eyes, she immediately possessed powerful eye technique. After Yarao obtained Phoenix Feather, she casually waved her hand and fire rain filled the sky. But after she obtained that golden jelly-like spirit treasure, she didn't obtain any special ability. After hearing Zhou Lin's explanation, Qinchuan was somewhat surprised, then asked doubtfully, "Could it be that that thing is not a spirit treasure?" "I also don't know." Zhou Lin shook her head, then said with a wry smile, "I only know that thing's name is Jin Xuan, I don't know the specifics." It was the first time Qinchuan heard the name Jin Xuan, so he didn't know what it meant. Unable to dispel Zhou Lin's doubts, he could only let Zhou Lin slowly figure it out by herself. Then let's not talk about this for the time being. Qin Chuan took out the white jade key and handed it to Zhou Lin. This is the key to the carefree secret territory, here you go. Looking at the key handed over by Qin Chuan, Zhou Lin was slightly stunned for a moment, then asked, "Did you find this in the carefree residence?" "It doesn't matter where I found it, the important thing is that this thing is useless to me, just take it." Qin Chuan smiled and stuffed the key into Zhou Lin's hand. "This key will become a disaster in my hands sooner or later, you understand." Chapter 473. In the end, Zhou Lin did not say anything. She silently accepted the key from Qin Chuan. She knew that Qin Chuan wasn't lying. This key in Qin Chuan's hands could indeed become a disaster and bring about a fatal disaster for Qin Chuan. However, she also knew that this key was incomparably important to her. "Qin Chuan, thank you." Zhou Lin looked at Qin Chuan with a complicated expression. They had agreed to work hard together, but now it was Qin Chuan who was dragging her along. She had not helped Qin Chuan for a long time. She had been accepting Qin Chuan's gifts all this time. "Senior, you're treating me like an outsider." Qin Chuan looked at Zhou Lin with a serious expression. "You might think that you haven't helped me much and have been accepting my help all this time. However, during the darkest and most helpless period of my life, you were the one who supported me to continue moving forward. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't be who I am now. Senior, you're the white moonlight in my heart." Zhou Lin's cheeks blushed when she heard Qin Chuan's words. She lowered her head helplessly and said softly, "I understand." Seeing that Zhou Lin was a little shy, Qin Chuan chuckled and said to Zhou Lin, "Senior, I won't disturb you anymore." Kaboom! Before Qin Chuan could finish his words, he was interrupted by a violent noise. He stood up abruptly and looked at the sky in horror. A dark purple pillar of light shot straight into the sky, emitting an extremely powerful energy wave. "What's that?" Zhou Lin looked at the purple pillar of light in shock. "What a powerful energy wave!" Whoosh! A burst of air-piercing sound resounded, and an enchanting figure suddenly appeared beside Qin Chuan. With a dignified expression, she said to Qin Chuan, "This energy fluctuation is exactly the same as the transmission channel we saw before. It must be the doing of those two insectoid warriors. They want to open a new transmission channel, we must stop them." "I feel it." Qin Chuan looked at Yarao and said, "I will go first, you go and inform others." Finished speaking, Qin Chuan didn't give Yarao the opportunity to speak. His figure flashed, and quickly flew towards the direction of purple-colored light beam, and Zhou Lin followed closely behind him. Yarao opened her mouth, but looking at Qin Chuan's rapidly disappearing figure, she didn't have time to say anything, she could only hatefully stamp her foot, then turned around and quickly left. In the distance, on a desolate grassland, a huge altar made of white bones stood on the ground, emitting an evil and strange aura. Below the altar, Sienna and Band were looking at the purple light pillar that shot straight to the sky from the top of the altar with fervent gazes. They were extremely excited. "I really didn't expect that we would find a teleportation altar so easily," Band said excitedly to Sienna. "As long as we wait for a while, this teleportation altar will definitely connect to the nest, and at that time, there will definitely be reinforcements." Sienna shouted crazily, "As long as the reinforcements of the nest arrive, everyone here will die." Behind them, Qin Haoshuan looked at the purple light beam with a complicated expression. He was very clear that once Sienna and Band succeeded, and when Zerg's reinforcements arrived, he would lose his value, and he would definitely be abandoned, and the consequence of being abandoned would be death. He couldn't stay in the human race, and Zerg was his only choice, so he had to show his value. "Guys, this teleportation altar is so powerful that it will definitely attract the attention of Qin Chuan and the rest. If they find us, they might ruin our plan. Qin Haoshuan looked at Sienna with a serious expression. I can stop them from approaching and buy enough time for the teleportation altar to connect to the nest. After hearing Qin Haoshuan's words, Sienna's expression became strange. Are you sure this is what you mean? Of course. Qin Haoshuan said without hesitation. I can't stay in the human race anymore, and now you are my only way out. Of course, I have to think for you. Thinking for you is also thinking for myself. You are interesting. Band looked at Qin Haoshuan and sneered. A wise man submits to circumstances. You are right to choose to follow us. Sienna glanced at Band, and after seeing that Band didn't have any objections, he said to Qin Haoshuan, You are right. Qin Chuan and the rest must have seen such a huge commotion here. If they come over to make trouble, we will be in trouble. However, you are only one person, how are you going to stop so many of them? Sienna's considerations were reasonable. Qin Haoshuan was no match for Qin Chuan in a one-on-one battle, let alone a group of people. Qin Haoshuan looked at Sienna with a strange expression and said, As long as you lend me that thing, I will definitely be able to stop them. After hearing Qin Haoshuan's words, Sienna's expression changed slightly, and he said sternly, Are you looking for death? This is the only way. Qin Haoshuan's expression didn't change, and he said, There is no such thing. I am just looking for death. Sienna still wanted to say something, but he was stopped by Band. Band looked at Sienna and said, Let him use that thing for the time being. If those people really come over to make trouble, we will be in a passive position. After hearing Band's words, Sienna snorted coldly and didn't say anything else. He reached out and threw a black object to Qin Haoshuan and said with a gloomy expression, You better remember that your life is in our hands. Don't try to play any tricks. Qin Haoshuan reached out and caught the black ball in his hand. Excitement flashed in his eyes and he said to Sienna, Don't worry, I will definitely not let you down. With this item, he would definitely be able to avenge his humiliation and kill Qin Chuan. Whoosh! Qin Chuan was running at full speed, and he looked at the purple light pillar in the distance with a solemn expression. The closer he got to the purple light pillar, the more fearful he felt. Zhou Lin followed beside Qin Chuan and looked ahead with a solemn expression. She said to Qin Chuan, Isn't it too risky for the two of us to go over there rashly? Let's observe the situation first. Qin Chuan wasn't a person who liked to take risk. If it wasn't necessary, he wouldn't act rashly. Before Qin Chuan could finish his sentence, a small black dot suddenly appeared in the sky in front of them. In the blink of an eye, the black shadow appeared within a kilometer in front of the two of them. Qin Chuan! An angry roar could be heard. Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin's expressions changed slightly. The figure that was rushing towards them was Qin Haoshuan. Zhou Lin's pupils shrank when she saw Qin Haoshuan, who was covered in Zerg's armor. She exclaimed to Qin Chuan, Be careful! That's Zerg's armor. Armor! A look of surprise flashed across Qin Chuan's face when he heard this. Qin Haoshuan had actually obtained the Zerg battle armor. Chapter 474. Not only did it require the support of a strong body, but it also required special training. It was very difficult for an ordinary person to learn how to operate a battlesuit in a short period of time. For example, Qin Chuan had never touched a battlesuit in his 20 years of life. It could be said that he knew nothing about battlesuit. However, Qin Haoshuan was different. As the son of the Qilin of the Qin family, he had begun to learn the basic knowledge of operating a battlesuit when he was very young. It could be said that he knew a lot about battlesuit. Now that he was wearing the Zerg battlesuit, his strength could be increased by at least 3 times. Otherwise, he would not have the confidence to face Qin Chuan directly. Seeing that Qin Chuan was charging towards him without dodging, Qin Haoshuan's face under the armor could not help but reveal a mocking expression. A powerful driving force suddenly erupted from the power device under his feet, causing his speed to soar to the extreme in an instant. He passed by Qin Chuan like lightning. Bang! At the instant they passed by each other, Qin Haoshuan's fist fiercely smashed into Qin Chuan's abdomen. The powerful impact caused Qin Chuan's body to instantly lose balance, and he fell to the ground with a thump. The intense pain caused his face to turn ghastly pale. He did not expect that Qin Haoshuan would become so strong with the support of the battlesuit. It was completely beyond his expectations. On the other side, when Qin Haoshuan saw that he had knocked Qin Chuan to the ground with only one punch, the smile on his face could not help but become even more savage. He laughed loudly and pointed at Qin Chuan and mocked, "Is this the MVP of the 6 Great Academies ranking competition? You're so excellent. You can't even take one punch from me, ha ha ha." Qin Chuan did not respond to Qin Haoshuan's mockery. He struggled to get up from the ground. At the same time, Zhou Lin appeared beside him and asked with concern, "How are you?" "I'm fine." Qin Chuan shook his head. "I underestimated him." "You didn't underestimate him. You underestimated the power of the battlesuit." Zhou Lin looked at Qin Haoshuan, who was covered in armor, and said in a deep voice, "Armor greatly improves a cultivator's combat ability. Unless we absolutely crush our opponent in terms of cultivation, it's basically impossible for us to defeat an opponent with armor by relying on our bodies of flesh and blood." Qin Chuan took a deep look at Qin Haoshuan and asked Zhou Lin, "Senior, how much do you know about Zerg's battlesuit?" Zhou Lin shook her head and said, "Qin Haoshuan should be wearing the insect race's standard battle armor. I've seen the battle armor that the insect race left behind in our human world 10,000 years ago, but it's a little different from what Qin Haoshuan is wearing." 10,000 years had passed, and Zerg's personal battlesuit must have undergone many improvements. However, the appearance of the battlesuit was mostly the same, so Zhou Lin could still recognize the origin of the battlesuit. However, she wasn't sure about the specifics. "What are you guys talking about? I want to hear it too." While Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin were talking, Qin Haoshuan suddenly appeared in front of them like a ghost. When Qin Haoshuan suddenly appeared, Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin subconsciously dodged. Although their reactions were very fast, Qin Haoshuan's attack was even faster. 2 simple punches accurately hit Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin's abdomen. "Didn't you want to back off? I'll help you." The powerful impact from Qin Haoshuan's fists instantly sent Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin flying. Zhou Lin was still in the air, but she couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Her face was as pale as paper. Qin Chuan's condition was slightly better, but not by much. Patter! Qin Chuan adjusted his body in time and landed on the ground. He quickly ran to where Zhou Lin landed and held her in his arms. He looked at Zhou Lin, who was frowning, and asked worriedly, "Senior, are you okay?" Zhou Lin gritted her teeth and stood up. She said to Qin Chuan, "He has a battlesuit. We are no match for him." Qin Chuan didn't need Zhou Lin to remind him. He already knew that Qin Haoshuan was not someone they could deal with even if they worked together. If they continued to fight with Qin Haoshuan, they would be killed sooner or later. "Ha ha ha, why aren't you fighting back? Are you trying to run away?" Qin Haoshuan smiled ferociously. His body flickered and he arrived in front of them in the blink of an eye. He raised his hand but didn't attack. Instead, he waved it left and right as if he was deliberately teasing Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin. Qin Chuan's face became gloomier when he saw Qin Haoshuan's teasing. He raised his hand and performed the thunder fighting technique. He bombarded Qin Haoshuan's chest with the power of thunder. However, the power of thunder didn't affect Qin Haoshuan at all. All the power was blocked by the battlesuit. "Sharp metal sword will!" Zhou Lin shouted in a low voice. The sword in her hand flashed and pointed at Qin Haoshuan. Qin Haoshuan didn't care about Qin Chuan's attack. However, Qin Haoshuan had to be more serious when faced with the invincible metal sword Will. He activated the strongest defense mode of the battlesuit. The armor on his body turned from light to heavy in an instant. Its defensive ability was increased by several times. It blocked the metal sword Will perfectly. Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin were shocked when they saw that Qin Haoshuan could block the metal sword Will head-on. Obviously, they had underestimated the power of the battlesuit. Ha ha ha, are you scratching my itch? Qin Haoshuan laughed complacently. If that's all you've got, then go to hell. Qin Haoshuan had already charged towards Qin Chuan before he finished speaking. He wanted to use the battlesuit's hardness and weight to crush Qin Chuan to death. Once he killed Qin Chuan, this thorn in his side, he would return to play with Zhou Lin. Qin Haoshuan's charging speed was extremely fast, and he was close to Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan had no time to dodge, and he could only take it head-on. If Qin Haoshuan was hit, even if he didn't die, he would be severely injured. Facing such a powerful Qin Haoshuan, being severely injured was no different than being killed. Just when Qin Chuan was prepared to be severely injured and was about to receive Qin Haoshuan's attack, a shout suddenly sounded behind him. "Stop right there!" As this delicate shout rang out, Qin Haoshuan, who had already charged in front of Qin Chuan, actually stopped in an extremely strange manner. Seeing this scene, Qin Chuan didn't know what had happened. However, he raised his hand and punched Qin Haoshuan's face without hesitation. The unprepared Qin Haoshuan was thrown to the ground. At the same time, he and Zhou Lin retreated again. They pulled away from Qin Haoshuan and joined the others who had just arrived. Chapter 475. On the plain, several tens of figures rapidly rushed over from afar, and converged with Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin. Looking at Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin, whose complexion was very unsightly, Yarao asked in surprise, "What's the matter with you two?" In Yarao's impression, there was absolutely no one in Carefree Secret Realm who could force Qin Chuan into such a difficult situation, not to mention Qin Chuan also had Zhou Lin by his side. Qin Chuan replied concisely, "That person is Qin Haoshuan. He obtained a set of Zerg's battle armor, and his strength has greatly increased. We are not his match even if we join hands." Zhou Lin added, "To be exact, we haven't caused any harm to him until now, we have been suppressed and beaten by him all along." Hearing the words of Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin, everyone was extremely surprised. They were very clear about Qin Chuan's battle prowess. Qin Haoshuan was not Qin Chuan's match at all, but now Qin Haoshuan was relying on a set of Zerg's battle armor to beat Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin. This battle armor had greatly increased Qin Haoshuan's battle prowess. Wasn't it a bit too terrifying? Just when everyone was surprised, Qin Chuan looked towards Lu Zi, whose eyes were suffused with deep purple radiance, and asked, "Can you control him?" "No." Lu Zi shook her head and said, "Although Purple Star Divine Eyes has the ability to bewitch and cause illusions, but I still haven't completely mastered it. Just now I was just trying it out when I saw you were in danger. If I try it again, then Qin Haoshuan may not be under my control again." Hearing Lu Zi's explanation, Qin Chuan turned his head and deeply looked at Qin Haoshuan, who was slowly crawling up from the ground. "In other words, he has already recovered?" "Yes, I have already sobered up." Qin Haoshuan stood up and casually patted the dust off his body. He looked at the crowd with a playful expression in his eyes. At this moment, everyone was incomparably cautious when facing Qin Haoshuan alone. When Qin Haoshuan saw that everyone was acting as if they were facing a great enemy, he once again laughed out loud. "You people are really interesting. Didn't you all look down on me previously? Why do they all seem to be afraid of me now?" Facing Qin Haoshuan's cynicism, Yarao coldly snorted and said, "If you were still a human, then we would naturally not be afraid of you, but you have turned into a stinking bug. This is very disgusting." "Interesting, very interesting." Facing Yarao's sarcastic retort, Qin Haoshuan however sneered, as if he wasn't angry at all. If I am a bedbug, then what are you guys who can't even beat a bedbug? Are you worse than a bedbug? Before his voice had even faded, Qin Haoshuan had already unleashed his full power. His figure as fast as lightning rushed towards everyone, raising a burst of gale behind him. Upon seeing this, Yarao didn't hesitate to take out Tian Yifan, then vigorously waved it towards Qin Haoshuan. However, Tian Yifan, which had always been successful in every endeavor, seemed to have lost its effect in front of Qin Haoshuan at this moment. It didn't have any effect on Qin Haoshuan. Seeing this scene, the complexion of Yarao couldn't help but slightly changed. Then she said to everyone, "Be careful, Tian Yifan doesn't have any effect." Rumble. Qin Haoshuan landed in the middle of the crowd with extremely exaggerated posture. The ground crumbled, earth and stones splashed everywhere. Everyone scattered in all directions to dodge, but this gave Qin Haoshuan the opportunity to attack them one by one. His figure flashed, and instantly arrived in front of Lu Zi. He wanted to first eliminate Lu Zi, who was the most threatening to him. Charm. The instant Lu Zi became aware of the danger, she immediately used the innate ability of Purple Star Divine Pupils. She used her gaze to charm Qin Haoshuan, causing Qin Haoshuan's attack to deviate, thereby dodging a calamity. Meanwhile, Qin Chuan directly transformed into dragon form, then roared and rushed towards Qin Haoshuan. His dragon claw directly pressed towards Qin Haoshuan, and tyrannically smashed Qin Haoshuan into the ground, causing heaven shaking and earth shaking sound to erupt. However, Qin Chuan, who had succeeded in one strike, didn't have any happy expression on his face, because Qin Haoshuan had easily pushed away his dragon claw, then stood up. "This little bit of strength of yours is really just tickling me." Qin Haoshuan looked at Qin Chuan, who had transformed into dragon form, and a trace of hatred flashed through his eyes. "Dragon form, hee, you made me recall the most embarrassing thing in my life. I will pull out your tendons and pull out your bones, then grind your bones into ashes." While speaking, Qin Haoshuan suddenly reached out and grabbed Qin Chuan's dragon claw. The strength in his body surged, and he actually threw Qin Chuan's huge dragon body into the air, ruthlessly smashing it into the ground. Just as Qin Haoshuan was about to ride on Qin Chuan's body and pull out Qin Chuan's dragon tendons, Bai Yu's figure suddenly appeared behind him. She held a sharp blood blade in her hand and stabbed towards Qin Haoshuan. Facing the attack from behind, Qin Haoshuan didn't care at all. However, what he didn't expect was that the moment the blood blade in Bai Yu's hand touched the battle armor, it suddenly melted and covered the battle armor, restricting his movements. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Qin Haoshuan wanted to break free from the shackles of blood, but at this time, countless red feathers fell from the sky, causing an earth-shaking explosion. The shock wave produced by the explosion blew Qin Haoshuan away from Qin Chuan's body. Without waiting for Qin Haoshuan to adjust his body, Su Kuang had already approached him with the Berserk Sword intent. The Berserk Sword intent was displayed, and the sword chi was everywhere, sealing Qin Haoshuan from all directions. Although everyone's attack didn't cause too much damage to Qin Haoshuan, it greatly interfered with his movements. This made Qin Haoshuan's mood extremely irritable. He roared and exerted the power of the battle armor to the maximum. He suddenly broke free from the shackles of blood, and at the same time, rushed through the rain-like sword chi and went straight for Su Kuang. Woo woo woo. A melodious sound of a flute sounded, causing Qin Haoshuan's brain to slow down for a moment. At the same time, a thick dragon tail swept over and swatted Qin Haoshuan away like a fly. Qin Haoshuan directly collided with the sharp metal sword intent that Zhou Lin had been condensing for a long time. Clang! The combination of the powerful collision and the incomparably sharp metal sword intent finally caused damage to Qin Haoshuan's battle armor, leaving behind a huge wound from top to bottom on Qin Haoshuan's back. Ah! Qin Haoshuan was furious. He stared at Qin Chuan with incomparable anger. Suddenly, a dark green energy ball condensed on his right hand and accurately locked onto Qin Chuan. "I'm going to kill you, ah!" In an extremely shrill scream, the blood in Qin Haoshuan's body crazily gushed out from the wound on his back. It was also at this moment that the dark green energy ball suddenly shot out, aiming directly at Qin Chuan. Bang! The energy ball accurately hit Qin Chuan, leaving a football-sized wound on Qin Chuan's abdomen. Under the intense pain, Qin Chuan cried out and fell to the ground with a plop. Zhou Lin was furious when she saw this. Her sword intent shot out and directly penetrated Qin Haoshuan's body from the wound on his back, cutting him in half along with his battle armor. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.